All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this village board meeting to order on Monday, March 18, 2019. We're very pleased to have with us tonight Cub Scout Pack 269 from Patton Elementary School to help lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and the flag ceremony. And joining us tonight are their leader, Michael Troidel, and the Scouts who are with us tonight are Luca Campabasso, Danny Rodriguez, Emmett Rose, Evan Lombardo, Benjamin Cronin, Jacob Troidel, and Joey Salas. So, gentlemen, if you're ready, if you would take it away.
Color guard. Attention. Audience, please rise. Color guard. Forward march. Scout salute. Those in not uniform, please place your right hand over your heart. Color guard, halt. Color guard, cross the colors. Color guard, post the flag of the United States of America. Color guard, post the flag of Village of Arlington Heights.
Color guard, honor your colors. Please recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Color guard, return to ranks. Color guard, about face. Color guard, forward march.
Let's give them a hand for a job very well done. The audience can please be seated. Thank you, guys. All right, would the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Rosenberg.
Here.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Here.
Trustee Sidor.
Here.
Trustee Padavani.
Here.
Trustee Scaletta.
Here.
Trustee Baldino.
Here.
Trustee Blackwood.
Here.
Trustee LaBedz.
Here.
President Hayes.
Here. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes, and we have just one set to approve tonight. That's from the village board meeting from March 4, 2019. Are there any changes or passes?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion to approve by Trustee Blackwood, second by Trustee Rosenberg. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Next, we have the approval of the accounts payable, and I call on Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. I'd move approval of the warrant register with a check date of March 15, 2019 in the amount of $1,146,018.20.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Rosenberg, second by Trustee Scaletta. Any questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta.
Yes.
Trustee Blackwood.
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz.
Yes.
Trustee Baldino.
Yes.
Trustee Sidor.
Yes.
Trustee Padavani.
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Well, we move on then to the reason why most of you are joining us tonight. We thank you for coming to support some very well-deserving individuals who are being promoted tonight. We have 3 promotions tonight, so our cup is really full. And so I'm going to ask current Sergeant Charles Bazinski to join me up front. Before we actually swear you in, let me tell the audience a little bit about this fine individual. Sergeant Charles Bazinski began his career with the Arlington Heights Police Department in 1994. Prior to coming to Arlington Heights, Charles was a deputy sheriff with the DuPage County Sheriff's Office for 4 years. During his tenure with the Village of Arlington Heights, he has served as a patrol officer, criminal investigator, patrol sergeant, and criminal investigation bureau sergeant. He has held various ancillary duties throughout his career, including case management commander for the Major Case Assistance Team, investigator for the Cook County Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, and supervisory roles for the department's forensic and arson units. Charles has been the recipient of several letters of appreciation from citizens and other law enforcement agencies. He has received numerous departmental commendations and distinguished performance citations. In 2007, Charles was the recipient of the Crime Stoppers Officer of the Year Award. In 2004, Charles received his criminal justice degree from Northeastern Illinois University, and in 2017, he graduated from Northwestern's School of Police, Staff, and Command. Charles currently resides in Schaumburg with his wife, Susan. So now, Charles, if you're ready, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, and state your full name.
I, Charles Bazinski,
Having been appointed to the office of Police Commander
having been appointed to the office of Police Commander
in the Village of Arlington Heights,
in the Village of Arlington Heights,
in the County of Cook,
in the County of Cook,
do solemnly swear and affirm
do solemnly swear and affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United
that I will
States
support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of
and
Illinois,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois.
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the office according to the best of my
of
abilities.
the office according to the best of my abilities.
Congratulations, Commander. We know you will.
Don't stab him.
Let's take a picture. Okay, now.
Yeah, I know. I was ready for this. Oh, I forgot my glasses. I would like to thank the chief, the village manager, and the command staff for selecting me for this position. Given the other candidates involved in this process, I'm very humbled and honored to be selected. Over the years, I've been able to work with and learn from some of the most talented supervisors in this profession. I could stand here for hours and tell you how I learned something from each one of them. However, I know the board has already set aside valuable time for these ceremonies as it is, and I believe me when I say it's appreciated. So thank you very much, especially with 3 of us tonight. Having the ability to learn from these supervisors was interesting, as they each had their own style of leadership. I tried to take the best of their styles and tailor it to my own. But even with their individual styles, there were 2 things that remained constant: their passion for the position they were in and the respect they earned from the subordinates, peers, and the community. My promise to the command staff, current and former supervisors, and the community is that I will do my very best every day to follow in the footsteps of those who held this position in the past. Also, I plan on not only maintaining, but increasing the level of appreciation, respect, and trust the community has for this police department. I would like to thank my wife, who still puts up with the 3 a.m. phone calls, the missed family parties, and the crazy hours. I'm sure there's someone in this room who would say she's a saint because she puts up with me in the first place. I would also like to thank family, friends, and coworkers for coming out tonight, not only for me, but for the other 2 members of the police department who are being promoted tonight. They are the future of the police department, and I have no doubt that someday they will be standing in front of you again. Thank you very much.
Take your oath over and sign it with the village clerk. Okay, next, Officer Timothy Jasper. Police Officer Timothy Jasper is being promoted to Police Sergeant. Officer Jasper began his career with the Arlington Heights Police Department in 2003. He received a bachelor's degree in Administration of Justice from Southern Illinois University. During his 16 years of service with the police department, Tim has served in the Patrol Bureau as a patrol officer, field training officer, and patrol juvenile officer. He also served as a detective with the Criminal Investigations Bureau. While serving as a detective, he was a member of the Cook County State's Attorney's Office Internet Crimes Against Children's Task Force. Tim is a previous recipient of the Crime Stoppers Officer of the Year Award. Tim has been married to his wife Leslie since 2008, and they have 2 children, Taylor and Ben. So Tim, if you're ready, if you raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, and state your full name.
I, Timothy Jasper,
Having been appointed to the office of Police Sergeant
having been appointed to the office of Police Sergeant
in the village of Arlington Heights,
in the village of Arlington,
in the county of Cook,
in the county of Cook,
do solemnly swear and affirm
do solemnly swear and affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the office according to the best of my ability.
of the office according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations, Sergeant. There we go. Did we have pictures? Come back up. I'm sorry. Technical snafu.
All right, one more time. Thank you.
Okay. Now, Tim. Thank you. Now it's on.
Okay. Mine's going to be shorter. I'd just like to thank the police department, village manager, mayor, and the village board for the promotion. And especially I'd like to thank my wife for another shift change that she's going to have to deal with. I love you.
Congratulations. Congratulations again. Now, Police Officer Brandy Romag. Officer Brandy Romag is being promoted also to Police Sergeant. Officer Romag began her law enforcement career with the Arlington Heights Police Department in 2001. She received a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and psychology from the University of Illinois at Chicago, and her master's degree in law enforcement and justice administration from Western Illinois University. During her 17 years of service with Arlington Heights, Brandy has served in the Patrol Bureau as a field training officer and a juvenile officer. She also worked in the Criminal Investigations Bureau as the school resource officer at John Hersey High School. Most recently, she served as the crime prevention officer in the Community Services Bureau, where she launched several social media platforms for the police department and served as the public information officer. She's been married to her husband, Dan, since 2006, and they have 5 children: Lauren, Allison, David, Regan, and Elijah. So, Brandy, if you're ready, if you'd raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, and state your full name.
I, Brandy Romag,
Having been appointed to the office of Police Sergeant
having been appointed to the office of Police Sergeant
in the village of Arlington Heights,
in the village of Arlington Heights,
in the county of Cook,
in the county of Cook,
do solemnly swear and affirm
do solemnly swear and affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the office according to the best of my ability.
of the office according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations, Sergeant Roman. Flowers? All right, let's take a picture. Your turn.
Good evening. I'd like to thank you all for coming. I just wanted to say a few things briefly. I'd like to start by thanking Mayor Hayes, the Village Board of Trustees, the Village Manager, Recklaus, Mr. Recklaus, Chief Morning, and the Arlington Heights community for this honor. I would also like to congratulate Sergeant Tim Jasper and Commander Charles Baczynski on their promotions as well. I'm looking forward to beginning a new chapter in my law enforcement career, and am very appreciative and grateful for this opportunity. This is something I have worked very hard to achieve, but I didn't do it alone. And for everyone who helped me get here, I offer my sincerest thanks. I'd like to thank my family, starting with my father, Dave, and my stepmom, Cindy, and my second mom, Jackie, for all their love and support over the years. I'd also like to thank my husband, Dan, and children, Lauren, Allison, David, Reagan, and Elijah, for being patient and understanding and supportive. And it's way past their bedtime to be here, so it's a little tamer without them. But I thank you all very much. I'm really honored to have this.
Well, thank you all again for joining us on this very, very special evening in Arlington Heights. We don't often have 3 promotions at the same village board meeting, so thank you all for joining us. And thank all of you, especially those who are in our police department, for all that you do for our community on a daily basis. We, as elected representatives, can't thank you enough for all that you do to help us fulfill our obligation to provide for the health, safety, and welfare of this community. And I think it's the respect that you've earned in this community was shown this past Saturday afternoon in the public open house that we had for the new police station. I haven't heard the final numbers. The estimate was somewhere between 800 and 1,000 people that went through the building, and so I think it's just a reflection of the high respect that all of our men and women in our police department have earned, and rightfully so, and the interest that our residents take in the job that all of you do. So again, thank you for joining us tonight. Enjoy the parties. take this opportunity to leave, and we'll give you just a second to clear the room.
Just the consent agenda.
Gonna be quite a party. I would say. It's pretty impressive trying to, 5 children, police sergeant, wow, that is very motivated.
Okay, we'll move on in the agenda then to citizens to be heard and and we do have one blue card for individuals who wish to address the board on items not on the agenda, and that is Lori Taylor. Lori? And Lori, you're just reminded of the 3-minute time limit. I know you're familiar with that.
Yes, I am. Oops. Hi, my name is Lori Taylor, and I live at 2715 North Windsor Drive in Arlington Heights. While I'm a candidate for village trustee, I'm also a president of the Homeowners Civic Association. At our last monthly meeting, the postmaster, Emmanuel J. Thomas, was invited to come and discuss our mail service in the Northgate neighborhood. He also invited the union steward, Chris, and a mail carrier supervisor, Rapan Patel, to this meeting. For the next 45 minutes, we covered a lot of ground. For example, there are 3 types of mail deliveries in Arlington Heights. There's walking, end of the driveway, and now the new cluster boxes. There are over 500 to 700 deliveries done by each mail carrier every day. The carrier cannot come back to the office until everything is delivered, even if it's 9 p.m. There are over 100 mail carriers for all of Arlington Heights. Of these 100 mail carriers, 97 of them are assigned routes. That means there are only 3 for floaters. Mail is sorted and bundled at the processing plant on Northwest Highway. Sometimes it can take a couple days for the mail to be received by the Arlington Heights Post Office. Your mail carrier really knows who you are. They should look at all the names bundled together, but sometimes mistakes can be made. Their routes are timed. However, they can run into obstacles such as sidewalks not shoveled or covered with snow from plows to poison ivy in mailboxes and bees. If a postal employee gets injured, this just adds to your expected mail delivery time. Vacation holds are carried out by third-party companies. When you submit a hold, it can take up to 3 days for the hold to work its way through the process. We concluded our meeting by agreeing to the following. The postmaster will submit articles of interest for the weekly email that the Northgate subdivision puts out on Tuesdays. And Postmaster Thomas asked, he is open and welcomes the opportunity to visit other groups, homeowner associations in the Arlington Heights area. All a group needs to do is contact him by his email address, emmanuel.j.thomas@usps.gov. The reason we had this meeting was because a lot of people were concerned about their mail delivery or lack thereof. To say the least, it was a very informative meeting, and by the way, I received over 21 pages of email, even outside of the Northgate neighborhood, that I passed along to the postmaster. Thank you very much.
Nice job, Lori. Thank you.
And also, we have a trustee here, Robin LaBedz, who was over at the meeting, and maybe Robin would like to say a few things.
Yes, I was there. Thank you, Lori. It was very interesting. There was a lot of give and take. I think it was eye-opening also for residents who attended the meeting to understand some of the challenges that the postal carriers go through. So I think it opened up a two-way street of communication that I think will serve the village well. As Lori said, sometimes mistakes happen, not intentionally. I think one of the things they talked about when someone is absent, that the mail carrier has to first do half of somebody else's route and then all of their own route, which oftentimes results in late night deliveries. So that's something that has concerned people, but that's a reason behind that kind of problem. So thanks, Lori, for having him there, and it was very informative, and like I said, I think it's really opened some communication.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you. Mr. Recklaus, I received another complaint at the police station during the open house from another area in town. And so I'm just wondering, what guidance are we giving our residents if they have problems going forward?
We're encouraging them to reach out to the post office and make their complaint. I think the postmaster is the appropriate individual that is empowered to resolve these issues, and so we're encouraging them to do so.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board on an item not on the agenda? Come forward if you would, and just give us your name.
Thank you very much. My name is Nestor Reyna. I'm a licensed professional engineer in Illinois, and I'm here in behalf of Melissa and Charlie Trout of 900 South Walnut. The reason I'm here, kind of relatively sudden, is because they are dealing with the flood situation in their backyard for the last couple of years. In my opinion, as a result, partly as a result of the work in Kirchhoff Road. They live in the intersection of Kirchhoff and Walnut, and also as a result of, partly as a result of the building of a house south of them. So right now their backyard is flooding, and I have been working, or I started to work with the village engineering department. Very kindly, Mr. Pagonis, Mike Pagonis, last fall recommended or concurred with me that the solution to that problem would be to construct a French drain in their property, but the village would have to provide some sort of connection for that drain to drain into it. And the reason I'm here today is because I've heard from engineering that this is a process that may take 2 years, and I'm kind of, worried that the owners, because they have already suffered for the last two, I would appreciate the board's assistance in getting some priority to this. I did a similar job for a lady on Mitchell Street, provided a French drain, and with the assistance of Mr. Pagonis, he provided a very short, stub. We finished the job. This was about 2 years ago, and it's working really well. So that's, in essence, my story. I intend to work with Mr. Pagonis further, but I wanted to take this opportunity to express the village that another 2 years would be too long for them to, to deal with this situation.
Okay, well, thank you for coming forward. I understand the staff is already aware of this specific problem, and these homeowners are not alone. Certainly, we've got many others who are in similar situations, and the staff has been prioritizing their efforts to utilize available funding to address the flooding concerns all over town. And so certainly we do have to prioritize. So it's unfortunate that people have backyard flooding, but the priority has to be to try to help those who are having water actually in their houses. And so, we certainly are aware of your situation, and I think we'll do all we can to address it as soon as possible, but realize that there's many other situations that are very similar to that one.
Sure, but I also take the opportunity to thank Mr. Pagonis for what he did at 534 South Mitchell. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anyone else now on items not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, we'll move on then to old business. And we do have 3 items to report out tonight. The first is from our Committee of the Whole meeting from March 11, 2019, and I'd call on Trustee Tinaglia.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. I'd like to move tonight, as I did on March 11th, to recommend to the Village Board the approval of a transfer of the 2018 year-end general fund surplus of $3.475 million to the following funds. Police Pension Fund, $1,500,000. Firefighters Pension Fund, $1,500,000. Municipal Parking Fund, $475,000, totaling $3,475,000.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Trustee Tinaglia, seconded by Trustee Padavani. If I could, Mr. Recklouse or someone, just give us the elevator version of what this is all about.
Sure, thank you. We had a really good year with the year end as far as the general fund. There were certain revenues that came in. We had some vacancies during the year, so there was some excess for this particular year. We don't expect that every year, but we had it this year. The municipal parking fund transfer is recommended because of a lot of downtown parking projects that we have scheduled, and we want to make sure we have adequate reserves in that fund for the future. And then the police pension and firefighters pension transfers will help those funds. They had a rough year in terms of the market value as of 12/31/18. Markets were down, and that's going to cause annual required contributions to go up. This transfer will help that temper the increase a little bit. So we're hoping this would help with the upcoming property tax levy.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Tinaglia.
And I think it's important to know that we did spend an awful lot of time discussing this at our Committee of the Whole meeting. And the thing that made the most sense to me was you can consider it a little bit like a home mortgage. These pension funds aren't going away anytime soon. So if it's paid down by $1.5 million now, it saves an awful lot of money in the future. And I hope you can verify that what I understand is correct. This is paying for something that is not changing unless we pay it.
That's true. It's going to help pay down an unfunded liability. This $1.5 million to each pension fund actually earns 6.75% each year. So if you look at it between now and 2040, it'll save the village a total of $6.2 million over that time.
Very good. That's how I remembered it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from the board? Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. And ideally, according to calculations, this may save each taxpayer approximately $8 on their tax bill. It may not seem like a lot, but it shows you that $3 million only goes that far and only creates an $8 savings. So it's difficult to move the tax bill, but that's only our portion. So I just wanted to emphasize that also.
Thank you. If nothing further from the board, anything from the audience on this? Melissa, why don't you come forward and just give us your full name, please?
Melissa Kerr. The Social Security tax is for the employee and employer each pay 6.2% on earnings up to $132,900.
Okay. Got a question? No. Okay. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the board on this agenda item? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Is this roll call?
Yes, it's money.
Roll call.
Trustee Tinaglia?
Yes.
Trustee Padavani?
Yes.
Trustee Sidor?
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee Blackwood?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes. And one other item to report out from that March 11 meeting, and I call on Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I would move tonight, as I did the night of March 11th, to recommend that the Committee of the Whole direct staff to implement the proposed revisions to vehicle sticker enforcement and collection program. To elaborate on that, it basically consists of sticker enforcement, where after, I believe it's 10 days, the sticker price will, there'll be a fine, and then after 30 days, I believe the price doubles. in the cost of a sticker. Is that correct, Tom? Or maybe you can
Just
elaborate.
to clarify on that
Yeah,
issue,
sorry.
the stickers go on sale October 1st of each year through December 31st. It's the normal sticker price of $30. After that time, they go up $10. And what we're suggesting is that after March 1st, they go up to $30 for a penalty. So it'd be $30 for the penalty plus $30 for the sticker. And then if somebody still doesn't pay for the sticker, in June, we would send a code enforcement ticket through the mail for that. Our intent here is to get compliance and have everybody purchase vehicle stickers.
And through that compliance, we're going to utilize the state's database of license plates to use that for compliance.
And I'll second that motion.
All right, thank you. We have a motion by Trustee Rosenberg, seconded by Trustee LaBedz. Further questions from the board or audience, or from the audience? Just for further clarification, we found that there was a 77% compliance rate with those who were actually purchasing vehicle stickers, registration stickers, and we felt as a board it was not fair to the 77% who were paying for the stickers for the 23% to get off the hook. So we're, by this action, increasing the penalty and hoping to get stricter compliance, get it as close to 100% as possible so that it's fair for all residents. So that's the purpose behind this action. If nothing further, then Trustee Tinaglia.
Just a real quick comment, and it basically had to do with a number of emails that I think most of us got, and a couple of phone calls that I had personally. Some folks complain that the timing is just awfully bad in Christmas time and so forth at the end of the year. So maybe the solution might be to change it to a July or a June program where changing out the guard there on the sticker is a little easier to do when it's not so cold outside and so on. So as a comment, maybe that staff could think about it and consider what the obligation or the complications might be to switch that. I know that would require an 18-month sticker to start with, but afterward, maybe it's something to consider in the future. So don't need to comment on it tonight, but just to get it on the record.
Okay, anything further from the board? Anything from the audience? Sir, if you come forward. You're going to have to come all the way forward. Wait, hold on. Come on forward.
But I didn't have to.
No, you do.
Excuse me.
Just give us your name, please.
Sure, I'm Mark Sporsich. Hi, I was curious, as a resident of 14 years, how are new residents notified to get a village parking sticker?
Mr. Reckland.
When they come and sign up for their water bill, they're given information that a vehicle sticker is required.
Very good. I don't recall it, but that's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. And finally, the report of the committee of the whole meeting from earlier this evening, and I call on Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would move now, as I did earlier this evening, to concur in the mayor's appointment of Brian Harrison to the Commission for Citizens with Disabilities, term ending April 30th, 2021.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Scaletta, second by Trustee Baldino. Any questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Brian, if you come forward, if you would. And Brian, you could probably just go right to the lower level podium there if you would. That's good enough right there. And if you'd raise your right hand and repeat after me, I, and state your full name.
I, Brian Edward Harrison,
Having been appointed to the Commission of Citizens with Disabilities,
having been appointed to the Citizen of Disability
close enough, in the village of Arlington Heights,
in the village of Arlington Heights,
in the county of Cook,
in the county of Cook County,
do solemnly swear and affirm
do solemnly swear and confirm
that I will support the Constitution
that I support the Constitution
of the United
of
States
the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and of the state of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
that I will faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
of the office according to the best of my ability.
of according to the best of my ability.
Attaboy.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Right, there being no other old business, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Are there any members of the board who wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? Any members of the audience who wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? Seeing none, are there any members of the board who wish to vote no or pass on any item on the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve. Motion to approve by trustee Tinaglia.
Second.
Seconded by trustee LaBedz. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Tinaglia?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Padavani?
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee Sidor?
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
Trustee Blackwood?
Yes.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes. Move on then to new business. And the first item is the Goddard School to be located at 1316 North Arlington Heights Road. And this is a request for rezoning from R3 one-family dwelling to OT office transitional for a planned unit development and for land use variation to allow a daycare facility within the office transitional district. Is the petitioner present?
Hayes? Excuse me.
Trustee Sidor.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. I'm going to recuse myself from the discussion of this item as I have a business relationship with the current owner of the property.
Okay, thank you. If you just introduce yourself, if you would.
Absolutely. My name is Erin Witt. I am the site development manager for Goddard Systems. We are the franchisor for the Goddard School.
Okay, why don't you tell us what you are looking to do here?
Absolutely. So what I'm going to do is I'm briefly going to go through what the Goddard School is about, our operations, and then tell you a little bit about the site, and then I'll leave it open to questions if you guys have any for me. The Goddard system has been in operation for 30 years now. We will be opening our 500th school later this month, and we serve children from 6 weeks through 6 years of age. We have an educational advisory board that has developed a curriculum for our schools that is a learning through play curriculum that's backed up by many years of research for them. Each one of our schools has an on-site owner, and we have a lot of layers and a lot of support that we provide from the franchising company to each of our schools. That includes myself, which is in the franchise development, and it works its way all the way down through marketing, educational support staff, and then operational side. So we support both the teachers in the classroom and then the owners as a business side as well. Moving on to the actual building, each of our schools has biometric security. So that means that the general public can go through that first door of the building, but the next door to get through to the classrooms either has an iris scanner, hand scanner, fingerprints, all those fun things, or an owner or director have to allow you into the building. We have 2 separate fenced-in play areas. They are designed by specific age groups, and they are broken up. We use 6 weeks through 3 years of age goes to one playground, and 3 years through 6 years of age goes to the second playground. All of our schools abide by the student-to-teacher ratios dictated by the state licensing. Most of our states are actually under that ratio, and that's as designed by our educational advisory board. Drop-off and pickup. So this is where we differ a little bit from other daycares. Our parents don't drive up to the curb and let the kids walk out to the school. There's not a teacher there. Every parent is required to park their car, walk their kids in, drop their lunches off, put their coats in, and then the pickup happens the same in reverse. Generally, across the country, our hours are from about 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Changes a little bit, maybe on a half hour to an hour on either end based on local demand. All of our buildings have vehicle protection, and this is something that is a recent change by our senior leadership, and that's just because we've seen too many accidents of people mistaking gas for brake, and cars end up in buildings, so that's something that we chose as a company to stand behind and really protect the kids that we're in charge of. We also require that all of our buildings are fire sprinkled. That's whether or not local building code requires it or not. That's, again, another standard that we stand behind. Every day, our kids follow a pretty rigorous schedule. They have learning in the morning, fun times. They have lunch, and then they're out on the playground 2 different times. And that's as required by state licensing. We have to give them, it's called a fresh air requirement. These teachers somehow get all of the kids in the school to nap from about 1 to 3. It's pretty amazing. I'm grateful for it, I know that. But that is what we call our quiet time in the building. So site-specific information here. We have a 2-story building that we are retrofitting. It's approximately, or not approximately, it's 13,259 square feet. We'll have 11 classrooms and a multi-purpose room. The multi-purpose room serves as sometimes an indoor gym if there's inclement weather out here in Chicago. We'll have 165 students, and like I said earlier, 6,000 square feet of 2 separate playgrounds. That's total square footage, that's not each playground. We also did a market study for demand, and this is something that our real estate managers and our real estate department take a very strong consideration into. Goddard Corporate backs, not financially, but we research every site so that we can stand behind our brand, really making a good contribution to the local community. This passed all of our standards with flying colors. Within 4 miles of this site, there are 14,200 children under the age of 5. Of that demographic, of that 14,000 children, only 32% are currently enrolled in childcare. Average household income, bachelor's degree, those are all something that we look for. We know that our curriculum and what we are geared toward is a slightly higher demographic, education, and financial. And then we also did a study of our competitors in the area and found that there is either very limited or no availability. So our site plan, this was changed recently from when we were at the Planning Commission to here. You'll notice on the southern drive, we did add the second turning lane. That was a condition that they suggested. I completely stand behind that as a site development manager. We have, in my opinion, and from other sites that we see nationally, an ample amount of parking for what we see as the demand. Not all of our teachers arrive at when the school opens. When each parent comes in to sign up for the school, they will fill out a form as to when they think they're going to be dropping their kid off and when they will think they will be picking them up so that our owner can gauge their staff requirements. That's based on, 1, just financially, it makes good business sense, and 2, we will also alter that to ensure that we stay within the state regulations for the ratios. Then there's just some renderings of what we propose the building will look like. You'll see there along the sidewalk, that's the vehicle protection I was talking about. It does its job. Again, more here is the front building. This is out towards Arlington Heights Road. And then these are some images of the playgrounds that we put out there. There was a comment at the last meeting to take off. On one of them, there was a sound making, you'll see it on the left image there. They can play like a piano type thing on it. We'll take that panel off so there's no music making out on the playgrounds. And then just some aerial perspectives of what the site will look like. And that is the end of my presentation.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Perkins?
Yes, good evening. This comes before you with a positive recommendation from both staff and the Plan Commission. The key requests are to rezone the property. It's currently zoned R3, which is a single-family designation. The comprehensive plan calls for office transitional. And we feel rezoning it and receiving the land use variation for the daycare is the appropriate approach. It would allow future reuse of the property for offices, which is a low intensity development. We don't see single family at this location, so we encourage that request. There are a couple of variations as well. Quickly go through. Immediately to the north is an existing daycare, and then residential homes to the south and the west. Also to the east, as well as the school on the east as well at Thomas. This was the site plan that went before the Plan Commission. The variation is circled in red. It's an existing condition for building setback. It's been that way for many years, although changing to the OT district enhances the variation and requires a larger variation. We're supportive of that request. They are also seeking a variation to install play equipment in the front yard, and also 2 fence variations to extend a 6-foot fence into the front yard for the protection of the play area on the north and for screening to the south. This shows the landscape plan. There is heavy evergreen screening around the southwest and northwest corner of the property. There's 1 additional tree that's required that the petitioners agreed to install. Traffic was discussed quite a bit at the Plan Commission hearing. The traffic consultant did do a gap analysis to determine how many gaps there were in the traffic on Arlington Heights Road in the weekday morning and evening peaks, and then projected the estimated movements into and out of the site. The key movements are northbound into the site and northbound out of the site. Those 2 movements have to cross 2 lanes of traffic. So one of the recommendations that staff had was, if necessary, to widen the exit to a 3-lane exit, 1 inbound and 2 outbound, allowing for a separate left turn lane out of the site that doesn't preclude right turn movements, and allowing for a clean ingress into the property. The Plan Commission felt this should be installed immediately, and the petitioner has concurred with that. The other issue dealt with parking. The parking ratios per employee are the ones that we're most concerned about, based on Goddard's standards for most facilities. They have a higher employment ratio than they are proposing at this site due to the ages of the children. So we have recommended a condition that if they seek to have more than 27 employees, they have to demonstrate and prove that there is sufficient parking to be able to accommodate that. With that, this is the recommendation from the Plan Commission.
Okay, thank you, Charles. Just a couple of questions before I turn it over to the board. No issues with respect to the other daycare facility just adjacent to you? That's okay within the industry? You have no problems with that?
We deal with that, and I'm going to say probably 50 to 60% of the locations we go into. They create the demand, and we have our national competitors that we know we are very in line and on par with, and they've created the demand, and it's here.
Okay. And Charles, if you could just put the site plan back up. Yeah, and I just want to make sure that there are those vehicle barriers in front of or between Arlington Heights Road and the playground in the front.
So anywhere a vehicle can come within 30 feet of a child, be it on the playground or in the building, Goddard requires vehicle protection. So it's along Arlington Heights, along that playground, and then everywhere along that sidewalk that a vehicle can come.
I'm just most concerned about
Absolutely.
Cars coming from at a high rate of speed off of Arlington Heights Road for one reason or another. And so how far is that from the curb, the western curb, to the start of the playground? If you have any idea in terms of feet?
Don't know the answer to that. Do you know, Aiden?
It's probably about 25 to 30 feet from the property line, which is set back maybe another 10 feet or so with Parkway.
Okay. Anything to add? And you also, I see some landscaping there as well, which I think, just tell us about your landscaping plan with respect to that front playground. Screening from Arlington Heights Road primarily.
Yeah, my name's Aiden Quinn. I represent the client. I'm a project manager at AKA. And so the screening in the front, you're specifically talking about the evergreens right there, way to the north by that.
Right, whatever you have to screen the playground from the cars.
Yeah, I mean, whatever's required as far as screening and to make it more compliant with Arlington Heights. I mean, the children do make a lot of noise, and we do the best to kind of screen this property and screen the playground areas as much as possible. The evergreen trees there, we thought it would be an appropriate accent to it. I mean, because we do have a front yard 6-foot fence that's required by Goddard, and this was an opportunity to kind of hide that in a sense, because I know Arlington Heights doesn't necessarily, or they actually don't require, or the requirement is 3-foot high fences in the front. So that's the opportunity to screen the fence to the north seemed appropriate right there. On the other side, though, the fence that we weren't able to screen, the site's very tight. It's an existing condition, and we weren't able to screen that. But, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from the board? Trustee Scaletta.
I would just say that I'm really pleased to see that something is being done with this property. It's, I mean, it's a great location, and it's a shame that it's sat vacant for as long as it has. And I know that daycare and preschool are really important in our community. I know that when my son was very young, that we were literally on a waiting list. So I can appreciate the fact that this is something that's needed in our community, and I'm supportive of the changes in zoning.
Okay. Do you want to make a motion?
I would move approval.
Second.
Motion to approve by Trustee Scaletta, second by Trustee Padavani. Any further questions or comments from the board? Trustee LaBedz.
I did want to say, I think it's interesting that you're actually repurposing the building. It's kind of a homey-looking building, so I think that is nice in that it makes it kind of inviting, I think, to the children and the families. So I was impressed with that.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything from the audience on this agenda item? So if you just come forward, please. And just give us your name, if you would.
Hi, good evening. I'm Jackie Paraclosi. I'm actually the center director of the center that's actually north, right next to them. I've been in the community for over 14 years now, and just knowing my families and knowing the traffic flow, I'm quite concerned. We service through 12 years, so we do bus to and from the schools. So my concern is trying to get out of there. My drivers already have a hard time turning left when we need to turn left, which would make us late if we had to go right. And my other concern is just pick up and drop off times. They're the same times as us. So with us already having probably 50 families to 60 families coming and going from 4:30 to 6, and now you're gonna double it and almost triple it with another place right next to us, that's gonna be a real big problem that we have in Arlington Heights Road. As many years as I've been there, my office does face Arlington Heights Road, so I see the traffic flow day in and day out. So I am quite concerned with that for my families who are 90% commuters in the area, and so they're all gonna be turning right. And so when they're all turning right, and then they've gotta wait for 50 yards over for people to exit and come in, and then another maybe 100 yards, not even, there's gonna be a light, that's gonna be a problem for a lot of my families in the area. And I promise you, the traffic is not gonna be good. Just from what I already know, from where the lights are at, it's already a problem as it is. So if you're gonna double my building, because we have about 92 FTE that come through, and they're gonna be about 165, that's gonna be a huge issue with traffic, I promise you. So that's all I have. I don't have any, findings. I just know because I've been in the community for this long and I know what my parents need, and I know what, and I will tell you, in the industry, I've been here doing this 18 years, 3 different centers, no one builds right next door to your competitor. I promise you that if you look. So maybe within a 3-mile radius, we have 4 other kinder cares, I know of this, and there's probably 6 to 7 other competitors, but they're not right next door. And if you look at all of those other competitors, no one is right next door to each other. So I understand that you guys aren't looking at the competition, the piece of it, but at the end of the day, no one builds right next door to each other. And that's just how the industry has been over the 18 years that I've been a part of it. And so if you look at the other Goddards, they do not build right next door to another competitor. So
Thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
Mr. Perkins, do you have anything to say? I know the part of the analysis was the ingress and egress from the new facility, but also everything along, factoring that in with everything else that exists there. So if you could just address that.
Yes, Mayor, the traffic study did go into detail, the ingress and egress for this property. The existing traffic counts took into account not only the daycare to the north, but all of the traffic on Arlington Heights. And the most critical move is the northbound going left into the site, because they have the potential to back up traffic on Arlington Heights Road, traffic going north. That's like every driveway along Arlington Heights Road until you get to the points where there are turn lanes at various intersections. Even some of our local streets don't have turn lanes, so that same issue occurs. when people are just trying to traverse on the local streets. That was why we were concerned about the southern entrance when it was just a two-lane configuration, because you could get more congested and people might get aggravated when they have to wait on exiting primarily. That was the case. So with the proposal that you see here, there's a nice clean entrance into the site. Once a car turns, whether they're coming southbound or northbound on Arlington Heights Road, they should be able to go straight into the property, into the circular drive area, park, and take their children into the daycare. Exiting in the original proposal, anyone in their vehicle sitting here waiting to go northbound would have backed up the entire site. And then you could have seen people, when they did get to the point where they were exiting, they were frustrated and gambling and trying to exit quicker when they perhaps shouldn't. This now improves that, so anyone waiting to go left has their own lane backing up into the site, allowing free flow right turn movements. So we think that's an improvement. It is unusual that there's a daycare next to another daycare, but from a land use point of view, we were more focused on the traffic aspect of it and the parking. Any use going in here, it's a fairly sizable building, 13,500 square feet. Will have a lot of these same similarities, maybe not the same peaks, because the daycare has the early AM and PM peak.
Okay, thank you, Charles. All right, thank you for sharing with us.
The other thing I wanted to just add as he speaks to that, right by Olive and Arlington Heights Road, there is Olive Elementary School. And with no turn lane, that's going to be exceedingly worse. A lot of our parents tend to drop off at us and then go over to the school. So again, I really think that that's going to be a big issue. And even in the evening, they're coming from those schools and they're coming to my center to get their kids. So it's not just going to crowd our center, it's going to crowd them getting to the schools with, you've got, people out there directing the traffic with the kids walking across the street. So that is my concern, that I come down north on Arlington Heights Road every day, and it does take quite a bit because of all the lights and the lack of turn signals that there are. And so I will just tell you, it's gonna cause a traffic problem. I promise. There already is one to begin with. So,
Right.
in my years of experience.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else in the audience wish to address the board on this? Seeing none, anything further from the board? Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Charles, it was mentioned there was a detention being put in. Can you point out where that's at with your pointer?
It's underground. I'm seeing if I can see it on this plan. Sorry, I can't see exactly where it is on the site right now. With this, I don't have the engineering plan handy.
Okay. It was mentioned it was somewhere toward the front or something.
I'd have to pull up the engineering plan, which I can do in a moment.
So, question as far as where that red circle is toward the bottom lower, is that a drive in and out from right there?
This is the southern driveway, so there's 3 striped lanes, 1 inbound lane at this point, and then 1 outbound northbound, and then 1 outbound southbound.
And where the red circle is right above that, what is that?
That's just a shade tree and a landscape island.
Okay, but the white line path across that?
That's a sidewalk that's connecting to the public sidewalk on Arlington Heights Road, and then a striped crosswalk for anyone who was walking to the facility, then come down Arlington Heights Road, cross onto the private sidewalk to get to the building.
And that same up at the top of the page on the right side?
Correct. This is a sidewalk coming from the facility connecting to the public sidewalk on Arlington Heights Road.
Okay. And then the drive kind of in the middle there. So is that restricted in any way? Is that right in, right out, or just all ways there?
This northern drive?
Yes.
That is an exit only.
Okay.
So there's about 6 or 8 spaces in this area. So probably mostly used by employees would park in this area, and then when they exit, it's southbound only.
Okay. And so in the memo that we got, it mentions about the trip generation, that the level of service is at an F, which is the lowest level. So do we still feel that even with that level of service, that it's acceptable to put this in there, like it is? It was on the,
That was the egress from the site, not the level of service for the Arlington Heights Road. It's still going to function at a low level of service, but it'll be contained on the site.
okay. So the level of service going out onto Arlington Heights Road, we feel is satisfactory then?
There's going to be delays exiting the site, like there are on a number of sites at the peak AM and PM time periods. But there's there's not much anybody can do about that. It's just a question of waiting on site until there's a gap available to move out into the traffic flow.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Anything further from the board? Trustee Padavani.
Mr. Recklouse, quick question on the discussion about the parents coming out and then coming out of this site and then going and taking a left turn into the Olive School, meaning there would probably be a lot of backup there. Is there any value or any benefit to putting a left turn signal onto that light that currently is just without that?
I'm not sure if when we looked at we did the traffic study, my understanding is when we looked at all those movements, that wasn't warranted, that wasn't recommended. It wasn't something that was indicated that was needed based on the standards. I don't know if, Charles, you want to expound on that at all?
Yeah, to change the signal, you have to meet certain warrants, by IDOT, and even though there's going to be a lot of students here, 165 students, there maybe that's 100 families or so coming into and out of the site. If some of them have 2 kids, that's still a very, very small percentage of traffic volume on Arlington Heights Road. So this development on itself wouldn't trigger an additional need for to change the signal at that intersection. And IDOT typically gives priority to the free flow north-south movement anyway, because it's their street and they'll be looking to move the traffic through as opposed to the local streets.
All right, thank you.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Thanks, Mayor. So Randy, we were listening to some testimony that it's going to be busy. So the traffic's possibly going to be crazy here, at least very early and again very late. Do we have any other sites in town that are similar like this that you can think of?
Where there would be
an extreme load where you can drive by a Portillo's or certain places where you'll see a police officer outside handling traffic when it gets nuts for them at certain hours.
Sure.
Is there any place in town here where that happens?
I mean, all schools drop off and pick up are difficult during those time periods to a school. And this site has much better internal circulation than just about any school that I'm aware of. And that was one of the factors when staff looked at this. That, as Charles had mentioned, a lot of the backups are going to be occurring within the site.
Right.
You can get in the site, but then when you're getting out, you're going to be stuck. And as Charles had indicated, given the large volume of traffic we have on Arlington Heights Road, this wouldn't be a significant contributor. But the other thing to take into account is any use that goes in there is going to be generating some traffic.
Right.
And that's something that, that obviously the owner of the property has a right to have some economic activity on their site as well.
Sure. No, I like Trustee Scaletta. I'm really just glad to see something happening here. It's been vacant for so long. I guess what I'd like to just know though is if in fact it gets to the point where a couple hours of the day, early and again late in the afternoon, where there was some necessity to have assistance out there, is that going to be covered by a police officer who has to go out and do something? Are we responsible for that, or is that going to be handled by this owner?
We would be asking the owner to manage traffic. The village is not typically we don't have the resources to put a law enforcement officer in front of a situation like this.
Okay, good. That was my point. Thanks, Randy.
Okay, anything further from the board? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, where are they at? There you are. Good luck to you. All right, there is one other new business item, and that's the Verizon wireless cell tower to be located at 1122 West Rand Road. And this is a request for a land use variation to allow a commercial antenna within the R1 family dwelling district to include variations. So, sir, if you just introduce yourself, if you would.
Certainly. My name is Doug Dolan. I'm with Dolan Realty, and we're a commercial real estate firm representing Verizon Wireless.
Okay, please proceed.
Let's see, here we go. Thank you. The proposal tonight, and the reason I'm here tonight, is that Verizon Wireless network engineers have identified an area in Arlington Heights which is not being served or is a weak area. What we're looking at currently is a coverage map. This is provided by Verizon Wireless network engineers. The blue areas and the dark blue areas specifically are existing cell sites. And the area that we're looking at the Cross and Crown Church, is directly between the two large blue areas. The area between has been identified as a weak area. So with this cell site, you do see the dark blue area at Cross and Crown Church, and that will provide the coverage along Rand Road and also provide coverage to the residents and the businesses in the area. We currently serve 4G, and we are in the process of transitioning to 5G service, and this site will be set up and designed to accommodate 5G service. Primarily, a big point with the public service is the 911 service. This additional cell sites allow the caller and for 911 service to provide a more accurate identification of the location of the caller. So additional cell sites in this area will enhance the identification of the caller. Also, most people now are dropping their home phones in favor of cell phones, including a lot of home businesses. So this will provide reliable in-building coverage for doctors, attorneys, and business people who choose to have in-home offices. It also allows for the homeowners to drop, in cases where they choose to drop their hardline phone service. Public safety, as was mentioned, 80% of calls now are made on wireless phones, and 55% of American homes are wireless only, and this grows monthly. RF safety is an issue that comes up from time to time, and each of the wireless carriers in this tower will be required to operate within the safety limits established by the Federal Communications Commission. And measurements on the ground generally are less than 1/10 of 1% of the FCC limit, and this measurement is similar to a home Wi-Fi service or a baby monitor. The proposed site, Cross and Crown Lutheran Church, is on the north end of the property, where you see the red arrow identifies the location. This location was chosen specifically because it was equidistant from existing neighbors. We're trying to gain as much separation as possible from the neighbors, and this particular location offered us the greatest separation. This is an image of the ComEd transmission line, and in the background is the Cross and Crown Church. And this is a photo simulation of the proposed 75-foot pole. The base of the equipment will be concealed with a brick masonry wall, which will match the existing brick on the church, and will also landscape the most visible portion of the wall. The transmission lines are approximately 140 feet tall, and our pole is 75 feet tall. This is an image from Rand Road. Again, the 75-foot pole in the screened equipment area. The screening, we initially were proposing a 6-foot masonry wall. We're going to raise that to 8 feet, which would cover the generator. This site will also have an emergency backup generator in case there's a power outage in the village. The communications and the 911 service will still continue. This is an image from the parking lot of the church. Just a closer view of the proposed pole. This is a stealth pole. A traditional cell tower, of course, has antennas and cables and platforms on the top. And we chose, because of community standards, we've chosen to make this pole a stealth pole, which means that the antennas, cables, and lines are all contained inside that pole. There will be no exterior antennas on this pole, much like a flagless flag pole. The color will be a darker gray, which won't reflect as much light as a white flagpole. This is the proposed site plan. The Verizon Wireless equipment is on the left side of the plan, and the pole is on the right-hand side. We have very limited traffic to the site. Is maybe 1 vehicle per quarter for every 3 months. We have very limited. Most of the work now is done from the Network Operations Center via a fiber link. Another view of the site plan with a larger showing the access drive, which comes through the existing church drive. And just a schematic of the exterior of the pole. Again, the cables, lines, and antennas will all be contained and concealed within the proposed pole. Top of the tower is 75 feet. Proposed, let's see, the antenna is 70 feet. We will design this pole to accommodate an additional carrier. So if AT&T, Sprint, or T-Mobile wish to locate in this area, an advantage to a multi-carrier pole is that we do encourage co-location so that we wouldn't have need for another tower in this area. So we do design structurally for another tenant. Centerline of future antennas at 60 feet. It's designed for 2 carriers. Again, the color is going to be a dark gray, which we feel will blend in the best. And we're proposing an 8-foot wall now as opposed to a 7-foot wall, just to make sure that all the equipment is concealed. Again, we mentioned that stealth design was specifically chosen for this property, accommodate 2 carriers. And the main goal, of course, and the reason we're here is that Verizon Wireless has identified this area as a weak coverage and capacity area. So, and the network engineers, they have a limited budget also, and so there's going to be more weak spots than they can cover, that their budget allows them to cover, but they have identified this area, and they have told me that the coverage will get worse without this site. Again, it's to provide 911 service as a critical component. Thank you, and I'll be available for any questions.
Thank you. Does the staff have anything to add?
Just available for questions. We have worked with the petitioner on the location of this antenna. The property is zoned R3, so they do need a land use variation and some variations for the screen wall height and the location of the equipment in a side yard setback. The earlier proposal was a 100-foot tower, and it was closer to the residents to the east. We did ask them to look and try to work with ComEd and place it within the ComEd tower. But ComEd responded that they were not interested in that, and that they didn't want another antenna tower within their right-of-way, impacting potentially their transmission lines. So we ended up with this stealth type pole at 75 feet.
Okay, thank you. If you come back, if you would, for questions. And Charles, could you put up just the first coverage map that was shown? Yeah, there we go. And maybe I can't see this real well, but I don't know the technology real well, but I'm just wondering, what's the coverage range of this antenna?
It varies depending on the topography, but in the dark blue area, you'll see about a quarter mile, the light blue, a half mile, and it'll reach out, could reach out as far as a mile in places.
That was my question, because it would seem that the coverage, I don't understand the technology, so it would seem like you would need antennas all over the village to really provide adequate service, but I don't know how it works.
Right. So most of the capacity and coverage issues come along the major thoroughfares. So that's where most of the capacity is needed. So that's why they're located along major roads.
All right, and it is addressing commercial areas specifically.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right, questions from the board. Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. So if what you're saying is true, that means somebody who's like a mile east or west of there basically has no coverage at all?
Well, the green still provides coverage. The yellow is when you start to reach into difficult areas. You'll see on the very southeast edge and northeast edge, you'll see more yellow. Now, white means no coverage at all, and I don't see white on that map. So everybody's got some coverage, but that's the weakest coverage is the yellow. And the RF engineer, there's a key on the bottom left part of that proposed coverage map. And you'll see that the RF engineers have tried to identify what each color means. But yellow, they still consider reliable on-street coverage, which means if you try and use your phone inside a home, and especially a brick home, it'll be difficult to have coverage in those areas.
So basically you have to walk outside to make a phone call?
Right, that's correct.
Okay. So if you didn't put in this tower there, you would still have, it seems like, adequate coverage, correct?
Well, what's not shown here is that along Rand Road is the gaps. That is a gap between those two existing cell sites, and capacity is now the issue. They're having those sectors on each side break, which means that the existing cell towers are carrying more calls than they're designed for. And so those sectors that are facing towards the site that we want to site on are breaking, which means that you get a fast busy signal, you got to drop calls, you'll get more of that. And I should add that Verizon works out in front of the actual problem, so they don't want the problem to happen now, but they see the problem coming, so that's why they want to invest in this area.
So is your goal to greater enhance the business aspect or the residents?
It's both. It's both. It's a business and the residents. This area is both. It'll a half-mile ring. Whoever's in that half-mile ring will benefit from the enhanced coverage. And now I should add too that the two existing cell sites will work better. So the existing network with Arlington Heights will work better because this new site will offload traffic and capacity, which makes the other neighboring sites in Arlington Heights work better.
And there's not a way to enhance any of the existing towers. It has to be an additional one.
That's correct. They're quote-unquote maxed out.
Okay. And if a second cell carrier is added to the tower that you're proposing, does it still go inside the structure itself, or is it exterior?
Yeah, these are 10-foot canisters. They're stealth canisters. They're made of fiberglass, which allows for the antennas to be inside the fiberglass canisters. And fiberglass is one of the materials that doesn't inhibit the coverage of the antennas.
Years ago, we had a carrier come to us, and they put a cell tower inside a steeple in a church. Is that something that's been done before?
Sure, certainly. And we have done that. We've examined all the existing sites. I was before your group perhaps 4 years ago, and we did a rooftop site at a Lutheran village. And it's not, our first choice is to co-locate on existing structures or rooftops. And especially with ComEd, that was our first attempt, was to co-locate on ComEd. But the existing church that doesn't have a capacity for a rooftop and equipment.
Or even something that could go inside a cross or something on the outside?
No, it's shorter, and it's a very thin, it's more of a decorative type of cross. It's not, you know, most of the churches, the steeples that we've gone in have been substantial brick masonry structures that are 75, 80 feet.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Trustee Baldino.
Thank you, Mayor. Charles, could you go to the aerial view? There you go. I'm sure that the Verizon engineers are all over this, but I need to ask the question anyway. We're right next to high power electric lines going overhead here. Are there any concerns about those interfering with this cell tower?
No. Excuse me, no. They operate on different frequencies, and there's no problem.
Okay. I just wanted to ask the question. So my second and the real question is, you know, we're hearing that we're migrating towards these small cell technologies. What's the long-term viability of this tower? If we put this up in 5 years, is Verizon going to walk away and say, well, we don't need it anymore?
No, and if they did, they would take it away. But no, they don't. The small cells, and there's been a lot of news on small cells, and it's a great tool because it allows the network to expand their capacity and coverage. They're very small. They go on 30-foot light poles, and their footprint is very, very small, perhaps a block in each direction. So it doesn't negate the needs for macro towers, they call these. Macro towers are much broader use, and it handles much more capacity. That's the magic word here is the small cells don't have the capacity that a macro cell tower does.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Trustee Blackwood.
Thank you, Mayor. A quick question. Across the street on Rand, probably going a bit east, there's a large development of NCH doctors currently under construction. Do you happen to know if any of their needs, their cellular needs, influenced the placement in this area?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay.
No, these are designed sometimes 2 years in advance is the long-term planning. So this would have been designed even before that building was
Prior to
being
that,
built.
okay. Thank you very much.
Trustee LaBedz.
I have a quick question, and also because I don't really understand the technology, but how does this enhance text messaging too, or is it really just the actual calls?
No, it's for sure data. Data
Okay.
is, in fact, you know, as our teenage kids will show us, the calls volume is going down, the data volume is going way
Right.
up. So data, so it's speed of data, being able to download items using all your software, that'll be enhanced with this cell site.
Okay, because all the discussion seems to focus on calls and drop calls and
Right.
so on, and not so much the rest of it that really even, I hardly ever use my cell phone for a phone
Right.
call.
Right.
But for many other things I do, and I know I'm not alone in that.
Right.
So,
That's a good point.
thank you.
Right. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the board on this? If you come forward and just give us your name.
My name is Lori Taylor, and I have two questions. One, I see a playground really near where that cell tower is going to be at. How does cell tower and the radio frequencies, or do they interfere at all with kids playing in the area? Second question is, will that cell tower be shorter than the electrical towers? Because there is a cell tower right now over on Dundee Road, and it has a strobe light on top, and we're not that far from Chicago Executive Airport. So I was wondering, even though you're doing stealthy, does a strobe need to be applied over there at that tower?
Short answer is no. We have our FAA approval, and that typically the rule is if you're over 200 feet or within 5 miles of an airport, if you're even within 5 miles of an airport, if you're in the runway area, you will need a light. But we've gone through the FAA certification process and will not have a light on this site.
And I think you addressed the safety concerns in your
Yes.
presentation,
That's
but
correct.
just, I'd say that again.
So the safety, we operate at less than 1% of the guidelines of the FCC, and at the base of the tower, it's roughly equivalent to a Wi-Fi system or a baby monitor.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the audience with questions or comments? Seeing none, what's the will? Did you have a comment? There's one more. Bob, give us your name if you would.
How are you?
Give us your name, please.
Bob Ehlert. I'm at 2630 East Bel Air Drive. I'm very familiar with the location of this tower and where it is going. I work with the church there in a program, and I rise because of the two things that I think are great for the city. Is one is it's in the Route 12 corridor, which is advancing in the number of people that are in that corridor. You have quite a few apartments going further north, and the need for additional usage and what have you. As the usage increases, we need the towers to do that work. The other side, which is also beneficial to the town, is within Cross and Crown Church we have, which I think some of you are familiar with, Ministry of Hope, which we minister to the homeless in the area and work with them. I personally run the jobs program there, and this is going to help us and enhance our abilities to help those that are in special need because of the rental that Cross and Crown Church will afford from this. So I think not only from the town's standpoint of what it will do in that corridor and enhancing the usage of what we all do, our cell phones, it's also going to help the town in what we do for the less fortunate.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience? Seeing none, what's the will of the board? I don't think we have a motion, do we? No.
So moved.
Move approval.
Move
Second.
approval.
All right.
Second.
By Trustee Padavani, second by Trustee Rosenberg. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Good luck to you. Right, we then move on to the report of the village manager, Mr. Recklaus.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, we have an early review request. Early review is a process where the village board gives preliminary feedback to petitioners who are about to make a formal application with the village. It gives applicants an opportunity to get some general direction from the board prior to finalizing their plans for submittal. However, I want to note that the board will not be taking any kind of vote on this item this evening. Tonight's request is from Arlington Beer Company for a potential brewery and tap room to be located at 19 North Hickory Avenue. The same group had proposed another concept back in 2014 as well. For the benefit of the residents who may be watching at home, I would point out that the village board adopted new rules to allow breweries, microbreweries, and tap rooms this past year after a lot of thoughtful discussion. And so the village sees the value and potential of craft beer as a way to generate economic activity and bring more visitors to our community. I know that the petitioner was present during those discussions as well and is familiar with the rules adopted. Moreover, as you all know, the village has taken a number of steps to make our code more supportive of restaurant entertainment uses in general over the past several years, with much success, particularly in our downtown area. However, the purpose of the meeting tonight is not to talk about the value of craft brewing as an economic generator. That discussion's already occurred, and the village board is in agreement that such uses do have value and that they're wanted in our community. All we're doing tonight is providing preliminary feedback on the pros and cons of the petitioner's particular proposal and discussing the merits and limitations of the location they've chosen for it from the village board's perspective. Ultimately, the board will need to consider whether or not this proposal fits the intent of the new rules they created last year, and if they believe this use is a good fit for this location. But again, as this is early review, the board will not be taking a vote, but they'll be just providing some initial feedback. But with that, I'm going to turn things over to Charles Perkins, our Planning and Community Development Director, who's going to provide a little bit more background information on this issue.
Thank you. Good evening again. As Village Manager mentioned, the early review is to talk about the proposal from Arlington Brewery for 19 North Hickory. The property is zoned R7. It's a residential multifamily zoning district. And to seek approval, they would need several variations. The two most significant ones being the square footage and size of the retail, tap room, beer drinking area, and then parking. There's currently no parking on site. Depending upon the final configuration of the layout, the estimate on the code required parking would be between 52 and 58 spaces, and I'll walk through that a little bit in a moment. So the property is located on North Hickory. It is one of our oldest industrial areas. These are small buildings that most of them have very few parking spaces available to them. These are small businesses, small startups over the years that have moved into these buildings, got established, and then moved on to larger facilities. As I'd mentioned, this area is part of an area that's being considered and is being redeveloped. Back in 2004, 2005, where it says future residential, the board approved the redevelopment of Arlington Market. There were many residential units that were built there, and the second phase of the zero lot line development is under construction. Also, around 2012, I do want to point out that the petitioner did approach the village, and a former planner answered their question on whether brewing and distribution of alcohol was a permitted use. They were given wrong information. They were told that it was allowed, but it specifically was prohibited. Since then, the board has changed the code in 2018 to allow breweries, but with certain restrictions. So, what we're talking about here is not the brewery part, but the other elements that they're seeking variations for. Also, in 2013, the village adopted a redevelopment plan for this area to try to facilitate redevelopment of this area and also rezone the properties from the prior M2 classification to R7. This aerial shows the site highlighted in red. The front building is being proposed for the tap room area, and the small building in the rear for the brewery. This was the plan that was originally submitted in 2014 by the petitioner. This is the front building. The first floor shows the brewery with a small office down in this area, and then a small tap room. The second floor of that first building was all for storage. Also part of the petition that was submitted at that time was the building in the rear. That was going to also be the brewery. So it was a very, as you can see, very small tap room was originally proposed. The petitioner elected not to move forward because there was no liquor license and no tap rooms were not allowed by the village at that time. The current proposal, this gives you the square footages at the top. The building in the rear is just over 1,100 square feet. That's the brewery. The tap room is the building in the front, the two-story building. That's a little over 2,800 square feet. And then the petitioner's proposing 1,500 plus square foot of outdoor area for consumption of the beer that they brew on site. The actual seating is about 118 seats. The capacity is significantly larger than that, given standing areas and game areas and things of that nature. Different aerial showing the site, again, immediately north of the Knights of Columbus, which has been there for several decades, and they have a lot of functions that also take up street parking. So the only option for parking is street parking. This aerial gives you a little more context, so you can see the Arlington Market residential and the townhomes. The second phase is under construction now that will be built in this green area. The village board also approved last year a 5-story apartment building here. They're currently in for permit, and the developer has proposed another 5-story apartment building at this location. This is just a different aerial view. So in the report to the board, there were several questions that were posed for the board to consider. The staff would like direction on. Was it the intent of the board that the brewery be in a totally separate building, or was it and the tap room be totally separate, or was the intent that it would be a brewery with a small tap room, which is how the 10% allocation came up for the tap room in the manufacturing district. I should point out, as you're looking at these kind of questions, that the code that was changed last year sets a tap room area of 10% of the floor area in manufacturing areas and 35% in commercial areas. And the reason for that is typically manufacturing areas don't have much parking. So the idea was keep the tap room smaller, where you have a higher capacity. Most manufacturing facilities have a lower employment ratio, whereas the commercial areas, like a shopping center, typically has ample parking for a tap room or a restaurant type use. Other questions deal with the intensity of the use. Is this amount of square footage devoted to the tap room acceptable? Does the board concur that the proposal is more representative of a separate brewery and a separate microbrewery bar area? And is it appropriate at this location given the long-term redevelopment plans? Very quickly, these are the plans that are now proposed. This is the first floor of the front building. So Hickory is in this area. This is the tap room area, the bar, the seating area. Outside on the first level patios, additional seating. In the open area to the south is seating. There's some high top bar tables to stand here and here, and then a game area in the middle. And the building at the back, the approximately 1,100 square foot building, is the brewery. This is just a larger scale plan. The second floor of the front building is kind of a meeting, gathering room. Again, additional space for people to consume the beer that's brewed in the small building. We're assuming there would be some seating on the balcony area as well. And then this illustrates the building in the rear, which is the brewery. So we did identify some scenarios if the board wanted to consider this. The top three scenarios look at the size of the tap room and different options. So 10% represents the ordinance that was adopted last year. You can see the square footage and the capacity that would typically be allowed by the building code. And then the parking code requirement is 30% of the capacity. We then looked at 20%, which is what Elk Grove Village allows as example. That would give you a capacity of about 53 just inside the building. And again, a third of that at 16 would be the parking demand. We then went up to the 35%, which would be allowed in a commercial area, like a larger shopping center where you do have parking. And again, the capacity increases up to 93, and a third of that is the parking demand. In those three scenarios, we did not calculate any demand for the outdoor area because that's what they've proposed right now is shown below. So they're proposing what we've calculated 42% of the area as a tap room. We've discounted the areas such as the public washrooms, the coolers, things of that nature to try to be conservative and not make that percentage higher. But you can see a sizable capacity there. And then with the outdoor area, there's a parking demand of about 56 spaces in addition to the employees of the brewery. So in the report, we did identify three options. One would be to concur with the petitioner's request and suggest that they proceed through with the public hearing at the Plan Commission. The second would be to reject the proposal and seek compliance with the approved ordinance that sets forth a 10% limit. And then option 3 has two scenarios. Option 3A, which would be to allow the taproom area at 20%, which is similar to Elk Grove Village, but have certain limits, limit the capacity, because even in a 20% area, you could get more than 53 persons there. Require some of the brewery function to be actually in the taproom area, so it is more like what was originally envisioned, to provide for some on-site employee parking, so they're not competing with on-street parking with the customers and other business customers on that street. To reduce the extent of the outdoor area so that it can be screened from the residential area to the east, and then to make sure that the outdoor area complies with the outdoor dining guidelines, which it doesn't technically fall under because of this zoning district, but that has certain standards for aesthetic design and also closing time. And then similar set of criteria for the if the board were to consider a higher percentage at 35% of the floor area. So that represents the alternatives. We know there are a number of microbreweries and tap rooms in the area. We've looked at several of them. Most of them have some parking available, with the exception of one in Elk Grove Village that really relies on street. Even Crystal Lake Brewery, for example, they have their own parking lot of about 42 spaces. So we are concerned about parking and impact that it could have to the neighborhood to the north on Minor Street. But we're looking for some direction from the board, and I know the petitioner's here to walk through their proposal as well.
Right, thank you, Charles. And this is a request from the petitioner for early review, so I'd like to give you an opportunity to make any presentation that you'd like.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Egan, president of Arlington Beer Company, president of Itasca Brewing Company as well. This is Michael Valente, head brewer of Arlington Beer Company. So, given what Mr. Perkins just said, we did do some background level setting on what we feel a microbrewery is and what the definition was, but it appears that we're not here to clarify that, just talk about what we're doing as far as the scope of our project. So it is true that we started this about 6 years ago, and since then, it's been a long journey, as you know, but the marketplace has evolved, and we have evolved. So the first initial plan that we had was to just be a brewery here, like he said when we came, and we were told that we couldn't brew after we thought that we could. However, the market has changed. Now there are multiple microbreweries. There's about 130 in the state of Illinois, and all of those microbreweries have some kind of attached tap room at this point. There's very few, I don't even think I could find one that didn't, because the market is saturated with craft beer, which is a good thing and a bad thing. So people create their own tap room to sell their market and become part of a community, to sell their product. So if you wanna, or that's me, I don't know how to work this. The first, so we can go through this. So microbreweries came to reflect an attitude. It's about flexibility, it's about experimentation, it's about providing customer service. So what is the definition of a microbrewery? It's a brewery that brews less than 15,000 barrels of beer a year. So microbrewery is about the amount that you brew. That's what defines a microbrewery. So go ahead, Mike. So microbreweries are part of a community, as you know. Multiple communities in the area, as you'll see, I went through, have microbreweries. Some have multiple microbreweries in their community. We are local entrepreneurships. Our brewers are residents of Arlington Heights. We do local philanthropy, as you can see. We've worked with the Muscular Dystrophy Association, John Hersey, Knights of Columbus, and we did 5 craft beer fests at the Arlington International Race Course. So we can skip through this because, like you're saying, you know, there are 200 craft breweries in Chicago. It's just been a movement it's been evolving. So just as Mr. Perkins said, Elk Grove, they had a 20%, in 2016 when Microphone opened, they limited to 20%. Last Friday, they opened 4,000 more square feet. So they're at 40%. So just from when he reported today, just from last Friday, it's been an evolution of space. So microbreweries are trying to utilize as much space as they can for their tap room to allow for communities to come in and enjoy their product. So I went through, just for your safety, the local, I didn't go anything in the city, anything downstate, anything south. Went through, talked to each brewer. Some of the brewers, not the owners I got a hold of, didn't know the actual square footage, but they knew their capacity. Capacity varies. Some towns are 10, some are 12, some are 15. Arlington is 15 square foot per person. So as you can see, most places have the capacity for at least 60 to 80 people inside, some 200 people outside. Penrose, they don't have a tap room outside. They're opening in 2019, as well as Microphone. They are opening an outdoor area this summer. And this is just, so these are just microbreweries close to the neighborhood. So we chose to pursue a taproom business model. Initially, we had not. That is correct. When we came here, we were thinking of just a brewery. But we felt that since this is the trend of the market, it's the evolution of the market, that this would allow us to interact with our customers, develop relationships with the community, and we can custom tailor the experience we want to provide. So in order for us to be successful and sustainable, we need to optimize our retail space, as has everyone. As you can see, the left there is Microphone. The right is the brand new that just opened Friday, another whole part of their brewery, they put another 4,000 square feet in, put some more brewery equipment in, but also put another 1,000 square foot of seating. On the other end, there's Penrose. You'll see it's family-oriented with kids and things of that nature. So, I mean, you guys saw our plans. Is that it? Okay.
All right, thank you. Well, again, the purpose of this hearing is early review for the board to provide feedback and ask questions to the petitioner about their proposed use, their concept. I do note that we've got a relatively large audience for this tonight, and so I'm just curious, and I hate to ask this because we don't govern by show of hands, but how many people out there are here because they're in support of this proposal? That's what I figured. Okay, we got a lot of beer drinkers out there tonight. Okay, so.
Well, and I'd like to say it's more than just the support of the proposal, but these are people that know us. We run another brewery. We are residents. They are residents in this community. We have children that go to school in this community. I've been a business owner and of a dog daycare for 10 years. I'm the director at Rush University Medical Center. So we're people that are reasonable people that have been sticking with this, and in some ways, it was a blessing because the business and the scope of it have evolved. Microbrewing has evolved, and so now we're at the point where we're really happy with what we could design to bring to the community, and we feel that the community would be really happy with this.
And let me ask the other question then. Is there anyone out there who is objecting, who would object to the concept as currently proposed for one reason or another? All right, seeing none. Let me just start. The only concern is, it's a great use, it's a great concept. It's a real exciting opportunity for the Village of Arlington Heights. The only question, I think, in my mind and probably in the other board members' mind is it appropriate for this particular location for a number of different reasons? So there's nothing against the concept. It may be better in a different location, but.
Is it not appropriate because of the TIF?
Has nothing to do with the TIF.
Oh, okay.
It's just in terms of that particular location, given what's currently there, what's planned there, the available parking. I'm just kind of giving you my initial reaction to it. I want to hear from the other board members as well. So nothing against the concept. It's just whether or not this is an appropriate location given what you're currently proposing. So that's my initial concern, but I want to open it up to the other board members as well. So Trustee Tinaglia.
Thanks, Mayor. So Kathleen, this is, in my opinion, this is really exciting, and I really welcome these kinds of opportunities in our town for a whole litany of reasons. You guys seem to be really good at what you do, and I think you'll do a great job here. I have really just one concern, although I think what Mayor Hayes says is also important, location of this. I'm not as concerned about that as I am about the parking.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I'm worried about your patrons, and I'm worried about everybody else that lives and works there. So if you had been able to show me that you purchased the property next door and you're going to put 40 cars in it, like you just mentioned, the one outfit has a lot where there's 40
Is
cars
the nights
in
up
it.
for sale?
Yeah. And then I would say, how do we get this thing started tomorrow?
So can I just?
Well, let me just finish. So in this case, though, it seems like, unless I'm missing something, we're relying solely on street parking. And that it just concerns me. It worries me as to how it's going to behave, how you're going to be able to cope with that, and how the neighbors will cope with that. So sell me on it. Apparently, you don't have to sell anybody else in the room here, but share with me your plan to solve that problem.
So a couple things. So microbreweries are visited in part of our presentation that we skip through. People do generally a 2-hour journey. So it's a destination. Either you're aware of it in your community and you take advantage of it in your community and you're aware of its limitations. So you're hoping that people walk, ride their bike, Uber. But if you're not coming, you're going to look on our website because you're going to want to know, do we have food? Do we allow dogs? Do we, welcome children? What beers do we have on tap if I'm going to make that journey? And on many, we're not the only ones that have parking issues. On many websites, you'll see where they'll say, please do this. So what we would do is probably recommend very strongly that people park on Douglas. And Douglas has ample parking. It has had every time I've been down there. Now, I've not been down there in the summer, so I'm not going to say that it always does, but it seems to have ample parking. The path from Douglas that comes up along Heller Lumber comes right to the front, our front door. So we would encourage people to be neighborly and park on Douglas. And typically when you are a brewery, the kind of people that you get, they look on and they respect what you're doing. You're saying, this is part of us being a good neighbor. This is part of us being part of the community. This is what we need to do. Other places do things like get a free mug if you come in an Uber, can prove you're in an Uber, ride your bike, or whatever that is. So, I mean, I just think the utilization of vehicles is a lot less for this kind of clientele than we think. I was talking with the mayor earlier, Itasca just did divvies. So if we had bikes, divvies, people take the train, could divvy it over. We have a bike rack in front. We'll be very happy to suggest strongly alternative transportation.
I like your answer, and I don't know that I disagree with it. My concern, I think I'll just restate, then I'll be done, is that the neighbors who feel that they've been invaded by this over there, let's say whether it's a business or the residential area on Douglas, at some point there are evening summer events that happen over there, whether it's baseball games or you name it. There's a number of things that happen under the lights there. So that's my only concern, though. Other than that, I hope you guys can bring it on and be super successful.
I mean, we have communication openly with the Knights next door. I know there are a couple here, and we supply beer for them and events for them. So we would have to be very cognizant of when they're having their events, because Hickory is very congested on nights on evenings that the Knights have an event. So if we were going to have a opening of a new beer, we would have to make sure that we're in conjunction with what they have planned on their calendar as well. It just has to be neighborly. It has to be collaborative. That's the only way to do it.
Trustee Padovani.
I'm very impressed. Thank you, Mayor. I'm very impressed with your planning, your thoughtfulness, your neighborliness that you just described there, concern for everybody around you. I'm thinking of the staff report, Mr. Recklaus and Mr. Perkins. You said estimated about 53 spaces were needed for parking at the current.
Based on our standards, yes.
Okay, I'm trying to visualize that. Let's say that everybody's just going to park along Hickory. How many cars can Hickory accommodate both sides? Between Kensington and Minor there.
Yeah, it's hard to say. And
no, I actually have it from the. You want me? Let me run and look for it.
It's just trying to get a sense of.
Sure.
Okay, 53 cars. Do we have that space available? And then I'd actually ask them, Kathleen, if you could tell us also your operating hours. That could give us an insight as to when your usage would be.
So typically the breweries are open no later than 10 o'clock on the weekdays, like 3 to 10. And I put everybody's hours that is within your area. So on that, if you want to, I don't know if you get a copy of that, but you'll see. Then maybe 11 on Saturday, Friday, Saturday, and then back till about 7 on Sunday.
So generally open at 3?
Generally open about 3 or 4.
Okay. 3 to 10 or 3 to 11?
3 to 10, 3 to 11.
Okay.
Parking.
So there's slight overlap with the retail business like Heller Lumber across the street.
Right, and I had to do a parking study. You guys do have that? Because I can't. And so did the Guido in the apartment building across the way. So we had his, he had ours. I want to say there's something like 100 and some odd spots on Douglas and 70 something on Hickory, but I gotta find it here. I got it. Somewhere.
Kathleen, can you move over by the microphone a little bit?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thanks.
Yeah, I got lots of research. Any other questions while I'm looking for parking?
And behind your location, there are single-family homes. In fact, that one open space is planned for more single-family homes. So the issue of noise or commotion or whatever you want to call it. If you could share with us what you're thinking about there to protect those families, those homes.
Right, and again, it's about being neighborly. Our place, we have two places in Itasca. One is in the Itasca Country Club itself, so we have to be, the brewing, we have to be particular about when we brew, although there's not been any complaints or any smell, but also that we're attached to a restaurant, so if we have patrons in our place, are they being respectful of the patrons in the restaurant, because that people actually have to come through our space to get to the restaurant. Our other space is right up against residential as well, with a
Which, can you give us an address or where?
400 East, 100 South Walnut in Itasca.
South Walnut?
So that's in construction right now. Oh, do you have the parking? Oh, thank you. I don't know, I don't have her code. 100 South Walnut. So that is a tap room. It's a farmhouse, and on each side there is some, and across the street there is residential. And again, you got to be careful of the neighbors. We're not out to make neighbors upset. It doesn't work. With the dog daycare as well, I was backed up to residential. If my dogs were barking at pickup, and I had to shut my doors. We have to come up with compromises, because you have to be neighborly. If your neighbors are going to be constantly complaining and going to the village about you, it's not going to work. So, and incidentally, our landscape architect that works with us, John Carlson, is also worked on the plans for the houses behind us. So he's, luckily, when I called him about this, he said, I'm very familiar with the area and has some great ideas. So, I had the parking. Anything? So the parking was given to me, oh, here we go, by the village. So, there are 70, looks like 73 total on Hickory spots, 35 west side, 42, or is that 70? 30, 35, and I don't know, I have it, I got it from the village, so. But there's 70-something on Hickory, and then over that, like 100 and something on Douglas, just so you know.
And do we have a sense for what the other businesses might demand for parking or need for parking on that street?
If this were, if we get to the point of a formal proposal, that'll have to be analyzed, and that would be done as part of a submittal.
Okay.
We had to do that and put it in with our submittal already.
Okay, so
So-
the only collision I can see here, I'm knowing the areas as well as I do, the collision that, in terms of parking that I can think of is with the Knights of Columbus having an event. There'd be some sort of overlap. The last time I was there for the Help USA Troops kickoff dinner, the parking was filled up between Kensington and Minor for that evening.
Yeah, right.
And, I observed that on Saturday, this past Saturday evening. The Knights of Columbus had an event, and it was all parked along Hickory primarily. During the day, you get some spillover of employees from Mariano's parking on Hickory, some of the businesses that are there, and then Hella Lumber, obviously. There's a lot of parking on Douglas, but at certain times when there's games or events, that can get fairly active as well.
When the Legion has events, the parking on Douglas is taken up, at least up to the baseball field.
That's correct.
Yeah, they park on, I think that's mine, on the side street as well from the
Yeah.
Legion. So they did a parking study, we did a parking study. And I submitted it to the village. I don't have it with me, unfortunately, but we didn't see where Douglas was near empty. So they did theirs in the summer, I did mine in the winter. We were very similar in what we found, but Douglas was very open. Now, on the weekend that I did it, I did back-to-back Friday, Saturday. Hickory wasn't as bad, but there have been times I'm aware of that Hickory is bad. Now, when we sat through the Plan Commission for the development that's going up, there was a mention of the village creating some kind of parking. some kind of parking. I recall taking notes on that. I don't know if that's true or not, somewhere on Hickory, the possibility of some kind of parking lot, so. I
That
don't
is
know.
correct.
Still.
We, part of the redevelopment agreement with the 4 North Hickory apartment development is the village will be acquiring, if I can get the mouse to work, the northern portion of the site. So it's just on the north portion on the west side of Hickory, south of Hella Lumber. The intent originally was to build a parking lot for the Mariano's employees, but Mariano's are no longer using that parking lot that you can see in the kind of southwest corner of Douglas and Kensington. Since they've opened up more stores, they've got, and the model is, I think, less employees, and some of the employees are probably sneaking on the street a little bit. They're no longer parking in that parking lot, and that existing parking lot would be redeveloped as well. So whether the village would spend the money to, another $400,000 or $500,000 to build a parking lot for the businesses there, we'd have to kind of evaluate that. The intent was it would be leased by Mariano's originally, and then their lease would cover the cost of building that parking lot. And
So those plans are on hold now, is what you're telling us?
those plans are on hold as well, what we do with the property. The other option was for additional row homes to build in that area as well.
Okay. So, the Frontier Days, the festival, during that time, you can't even get close to Rec Park because of the parking. What would you guys do during that time?
That's when you have to advertise you have to send out blasts and advertise and tell people there will be no parking. So if you're coming, you need to Uber, you need to ride your bike, you need to walk, things of that nature, the train.
Big question then would be your patrons. You mostly expect them to come from Arlington Heights, Mart Prospect, right around here?
So generally, your core group are your neighbors in breweries such as this. And what I was explaining, there's lots of concept coming out of even each town having a brewery in that section, like the west side of Arlington Heights or the north side of Arlington Heights Brewery. That's how specific it's coming with how the trend is going, the market is going. But we would expect that we would have a client base here in Arlington Heights, and then we would expect that there would be people coming because it's a destination. A microbrewery with a tap room is a destination, and people come. And like I said, generally they do 2-hour trends. They say 80% of the people usually travel within 2 hours to go to breweries. So they might hit our brewery and then Elk Grove or things of that nature, wherever is close.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you. So it's a very exciting opportunity that you're bringing forward. I have similar concerns about the parking, so let me ask you a couple of questions. What efforts have you made to work with a neighboring business that has parking to be able to utilize their parking?
So that's a good question. We have another property that we rent on 3 North, and there is a gravel lot, but I don't know if we use that for parking, if we would have to make that actual parking lot. I mean, those are kind of things that we haven't discussed, but we do rent 3 North, and there is a big gravel section there. We had talked about talking with like Resoff Automotive and things of that nature if we need to. So we do know several other places on the block. There's not a lot of parking on site from what I can see, for the businesses on the street as it is.
No, I agree, and I think that that's why you see that we're looking to redevelop the neighborhood. And I think that is a good thing for you, but is challenging for me personally, trying to figure out, okay, so, even when you gave us the counts that were provided to you by the village, that while that call it quarter of a block is being redeveloped, there's not going to be any parking on that side of the street. And obviously that'll be freed up, but then there's also going to be retail over there. So we're going to want to make sure that there's ample parking for those retailers as well, since somebody's spending millions of dollars to build
Yeah, I think
a
he
brand
has
new building.
underground parking, and he said he was going to have some spots for the retail in the underground. That's the way I understood it and we've spoken with him because he's pretty excited about our project. Obviously, we're complementary to each other with studio and 1 bedrooms. But I thought that the way I understood it, and I could be wrong, is that he has parking for his residents, and then there was going to be some retail parking underground as well.
Okay. I don't remember there being underground retail, but I hear what you're saying. I remember it being surface lot. So if I see that you have kind of an outdoor activity area, how many parking spaces could you fit along the side of the building?
That is, again, gravel. It's not parking, so I don't know if we decided that, I don't know that we would put that into parking. I don't know if that is even feasible, if it's wide enough, it's code. I have no idea. Maybe the staff can guide me on that. They've never proposed that as parking for us.
Okay, well, just so we're clear, you couldn't have a gravel lot. It would have to be
Right,
paved.
no, I know
Okay.
that, but I don't know if it meets the whole criteria for width and space and angle. I mean, could you back out, back in? I don't know.
I don't know. I'm trying to get you to a yes, and I'm not there yet. So I'm trying to find
Right.
ways that you can help me solve your problem.
Mm-hmm. Well, so we can go to we can vet other businesses. We felt that there was going to be enough parking for us and our capacity given Hickory and Douglas combined.
Okay. You know, the other issue or concern that I have, and Charles, could you throw up the that shows the neighborhood, is that as you get closer to Minor, you also have multifamily residential, and those people have visitors, and they would expect to be able to park on the street as well. So, I want to see you succeed, and I want to see this happen. I'm concerned that that it may be too large, and I'm just trying to figure out how you can resolve some of the parking concerns. And I can appreciate, trying to use Douglas. I don't know that that's necessarily a solution to the problem.
So there have been other breweries with similar issues that will do like peak valet. So we could consider doing that, where you would actually take the cars and kind of move them off-site, have people just drop off and then park their car for them at peak hours, not consistent valet, but peak valet to keep the parking cleared on the street if that's what we needed to do.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Right, one quick thought, Trustee Padovani.
This is a long shot. Thank you, Mayor. It's a long shot, but I'm looking at this this particular aerial view, and behind your space, there's a small road, or not quite developed road, that dead ends into the parking lot for the bowling alley.
True.
And I don't know what their capacity or their needs are, especially during your times. I'm wondering, have you talked to them about possibly leasing some of their spaces?
Oh, it's a great idea. We'd be willing to approach them.
They may not. I mean,
Right, they may not.
they've
I
got leagues.
believe the Knights have something with their receptacles and things of that nature. I don't know what they would be willing to do. We're willing to even talk to Mariano's or whoever. I don't know who would be willing to work with us, but we're willing to work with anybody that we would need to.
Because I was back there this last weekend just checking it out, and it would be a very, very short walk to your back door, or the
Back
the
gate.
back end of your property there, if that could ever happen. But again, they have leagues. I've been told they have very busy leagues. So it's just a long shot, but it's an idea.
Well, and we're similarly landlocked in Itasca. I mean, again, this is the M2, but there it's more of a business district, so we have to go on the street, but then we had to take a neighboring business and lease their lot from them for that. So we had to come up with an agreement. I know, pardon me? I think there's some
Trustee-
area on Heller that can be leased, some little spot on Heller that can be leased, so.
Thank you, Mayor.
Trustee Padovani, if I could just jump in, there is part of the residential developments being built in this green area. I wish I could get the mouse to work, but we'll extend the street. So if Beverly kind of currently terminates with the parking lot just to the left, that street will continue all the way through to where the townhomes are, and there'll be residential on each side of that. And then Campbell Street will be extended west-east through part of that parking lot as well. And that's currently village-owned right-of-way. That's the long-term plan.
Oh, so the parking lot could be smaller when all this is done.
Fractionally. I mean, it's kind of a drive aisle right now, so there would be some modifications to that because that parking lot is actually on village-owned property right next to the building.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. It's just an idea, though, depending on the bowling
I know
alley's
they know
needs.
the man that owns the liquor store on the end as well. So it would be useful for us to vet each of those businesses that have parking lots, especially that liquor store area is empty with the dry cleaner at night. And again, people are used to walking and people are used to these being in manufacturing and industrial parks, so that's not an issue, I think, with our clientele, or we can valet.
Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you. I also have to echo the parking issue because as confident you seem to be that this can be solved, we're the ones that get the complaints and the issues and that. So we need to feel like we're prepared for that. So I do think it's an exciting project, and I have no trouble with it actually being here because it's with this sort of mixed use of types of buildings here. There's the townhomes, there's apartments, there's retail and all that. I can see this here. So that part of it doesn't bother me in terms of location, which is something that the staff was interested in hearing from us. But it is trying to figure out how to address some of the parking needs. And then the other thing that would be, that I would like to be considered is some sort of screening of the outdoor seating area, because you will have residential close by. And I can see this as being a very lovely spot, that you could do with a lot of, vegetation and stuff like that, and nice outdoor type things. So I don't see that as I can see it could actually enhance the building and bring the whole thing together. But I think that would also be kind of beneficial to the residents that are nearby.
Sure, 100%. We do have a landscape architect that we work with that's excellent at this.
Okay, that's good. So those are my concerns. Thanks.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. So, I won't echo the parking thing again, but that's an issue. So how many employees do you expect to have working for you at peak time, per se?
1 to 2.
That's it? In the whole place?
That's it. Yesterday in Penrose, they had 60 people in there with 1 bartender. So people come to the bar, there isn't a wait staff. If the outdoor area was open, then that would increase, but during the day, it's 1 to 2 people behind the bar.
Okay, what about somebody who's working in the brewery part?
So there's 2. Yeah.
Just you? Okay.
Well, and maybe Michael at times, but yeah. And not, sometimes Zach is going to be brewing at times that the bar's not open.
Okay. And if the outdoor is open, maybe another couple percent? Okay.
People would have to come inside, but you would want to make sure that there were people just milling around and making sure that everything was okay out there.
Okay.
But
So maybe
it's a bar service, so people have to come up to the bar. That's part of the whole experience. Is the brewers are usually behind there, or somebody that's very knowledgeable in craft beer, and there's conversations to be had about what to drink.
So maybe at the most half a dozen at the.
Yeah, I mean, rotating, right? I wouldn't say there, unless there was something that we were doing that was, I had discussed with the staff that there's possibilities, which is why we wanted to have the bigger space, which is why there's not a lot of craft breweries opening up, but they're expanding. So just like similarly with Elk Grove, people were approaching them for parties. The teachers might have wanted to have a party after work. You want to make sure you have space to accommodate the needs of the community. So if we had an event like that, per se, we would have extra staff in there. So maximum, I would say 4 or 5 in there at a time.
Okay.
It's not that big a space.
So,
But typically 1 or 2.
music, live at all, potentially?
So breweries typically do like acoustic. If we would have anything, it would be something of that nature.
And outdoors, potentially just piped-in music or something?
Correct.
Okay. So, in your opinion, what percentage could you live with as far as in the tap room? I mean, let's say we don't say 40, and let's say we don't say 35.
Right.
Could you live at 20? I mean, is that acceptable to you in your business plan, or?
So I would have to take that back to the team. I'm going to be honest.
The team of you three?
Other than Elk Grove, I have other people in it too. But other than Elk Grove, we're limited by consumption. So we're limited at 48 ounces. Elk Grove actually just made their 60 ounces. We're willing to live with 48. But if I'm limited on consumption and capacity, I don't know how viable my business could be. So that would be something that I would have to crunch numbers on, to be frank with you. Solemn Oath had a limited, they were the only other ones limited at 48 ounces. They took that away. The Village recently, Naperville, they're in Naperville, just took that away.
So
So-
is typically 48 ounces, 5 glasses of 12 ounces, or is it 3 glasses
So
of 16?
what
Or
microphone did, because typically there is no restriction, to be honest, but since Elk Grove had it, they do little samples, like they do 4 ounces and 5-ounce glasses to give
Sure.
people a longer time, kind of to stretch out. There's a couple of people in the audience that were telling me they had their second pint and they were like, okay, you're done after your next one, and they were like, wait, what? So, I mean, I think it's a surprise to people that it's limited. That's why I think they upped it. They just upped it to 60 ounces in Elk Grove.
But Trustee Rosenberg, your question was with respect to the floor area for dedicated
For
to
the
the
tap
tap
room,
room?
Right, so- yes.
Right, so I know you went off on this, the amount of ounces, but we're talking, I think the question was, what would you be willing to reduce the proposed 42% to, given that our
I think-
ordinance says 10%?
Right.
I think that's what you were saying.
I'm
as far
saying
as
if my
that-
consumption's limited and my capacity, then I have to crunch those numbers to see what I could.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
'Cause if I'm limited to, well, and if, at 10%, I have 26, 25 people, and they can drink 48 ounces, and it might take them hours, then I can't let another, so I have 20 people in there, then I gotta wait for them to leave before, so I have to look at how this is gonna work as a business model, if it's sustainable.
So hold that thought for a second. So as far as for staff, what is our current ordinance with consumption? Do we have one?
48 ounces.
48 ounces.
48 ounces. So I mean, under your current plan, is that, do you find that, how long does it take somebody to typically consume 48 ounces?
What would you guys say?
So it depends a lot. Each beer will be served in different sizes and
Okay.
types of glassware, depending on its strength, depending on its heaviness, what have you. So, if someone drinks, if someone's gonna get like an 8-ounce pour of a heavy barley wine, that might take them an hour to drink it. Whereas if you got a 16-ounce pour of a Kolsch, you might be able to drink that right away. So it's all gonna matter.
But under your typical model, I think you mentioned that typically somebody would be there for a couple hours at the most?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if we're open 8 hours and we can flip our place twice, and then we only have 20 people, or, if they're there, or we could flip it 3 times, then you're talking 60 people total all night. At 48 ounces, so they can only drink 48 ounces each person.
So if you said the turnover's every 2 hours and you're open
Well,
8
we don't, I
hours,
mean, I
isn't
wouldn't
that
say,
4
I would
times?
say that it depends. There's games, it depends on what kind of clientele you have. If you have someone coming in alone or just a couple, or if you have a group of people that are gonna sit down and play a bunch of games and things of that nature, so. I haven't done a time study, but I could vet it amongst our, neighboring brewers and see what they say.
because obviously, we're trying to do what's best for you, but on the other hand, try to accommodate the neighborhood also. And,
Sure.
when you walk in with no parking, it's very difficult. I mean, if you're in the downtown area, it'd be one thing because there's a lot of street parking, there's parking garages, there's parking lots. But where you're going, there's nothing except for the street. So you're competing with everybody else. And so you're not even walking in with, here's 6 spaces for my employees or anything, so.
So I will say that I'm up and down the neighborhood. We've been there 5 years with the property. We're probably competing mostly with the Knights. Heller has a few, there never is a full street that I've seen, and I've been there frequently during the day or at 3 o'clock to 5. If anything, it's just when the Knights have some kind of an event that the parking becomes an issue.
Okay, so even when there's baseball going on at the Diamond, or?
Well, the baseball at the Diamond doesn't affect Hickory typically. It
It
is
affect
over
Douglas, right.
Douglas, correct.
Right,
So
but
one or
that's-
the other, right.
Right, but that's limiting your
Right, Douglas
availability
has
that you're.
Douglas has a lot of parking, and yes, I have not seen a baseball game, but I don't know if that occurs during the day or if there's lights in the evening. I have not seen that, yeah.
Right, okay. All right, thank you.
Trustee Sidor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for being persistent. Have you ever seen the guy from Ivy Hotel come before us over the last 3 years? This is why I'm kind of having a whole deja vu thing here. Because we beat that guy up pretty bad on parking, but he was as persistent as heck, and he finally made it. Charles, eventually, I know in the downtown area, we have 2-hour limit street parking, right?
That's correct, yes.
Will that be the case? Is that, I don't know what the case currently is in this area, and what will the case be when 10 years from now, 8 years from now, whenever the TIF district is completely, developed, hopefully, within that period of time or whatever? Are we going to change the street parking limitations on there?
It's possible. A lot would depend on the uses, the demand, the turnover without any enforcement, and then the staffing to be able to manage enforcement. So it would really depend. There'll probably be some growing pains along the way. So with the 4 North Hickory, they have parking for the residential. There's a surface area behind. They probably would only allow the employees of their commercial to park there, so any customers in that new space would be competing for on-street as well. So it could be that we get to a point where there would have to be some, hourly restrictions on Hickory and potentially even Douglas as well.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because I remember back when we voted on the Hickory TIF district and the renderings that you had, it was kind of like a little downtown Arlington Heights, except a quarter mile away, right? And all this pedestrian stuff, and it looked very cool. So I don't want the petitioner to think that there's going to be unlimited street parking. So take that into your assumptions as you move forward, that we may very well in the future, when that area is completely developed, limit street parking to 2 hours. And you're going to have your patrons getting tickets, and they're not going to be happy. And just like all the restaurants downtown, sometimes they're not happy, and you know the story. I don't have to tell you. And I appreciate, if you were on Shark Tank, you'd do really good, because you got all your numbers. You gave us a chart on all the other breweries and their spaces, but what you didn't tell us what their parking was. You had, their hours, and you had, their square footage and their seating capacity, but not parking. And that's the only issue here. I mean, I can think outside the box. I think I can go to answer all those questions you had up originally, Charles. Is this really the intent of our code? Is this the intent of the microbrewery and, tasting room type of thing? But we've been behind the curve on this for so long, in my opinion, just my opinion, that now you're telling us, as the expert, that, it's already evolved beyond to where we're trying to catch up to. It's already moved forward with increasing capacities and more seating capacities. So how do you get us to say, to give you something positive to do here? It's really going to boil down to parking, I think, for most of us. I think you'll be a conscientious neighbor. You seem to be that way. From your renderings, it looks like you're going to do a nice job. I know this gentleman from TOA. He's served me plenty of dumplings, and we've talked at length, over the years about this whole project. As I look at this aerial right here, it's kind of like Wrigleyville. You got a baseball diamond, you have a microbrewery. I think it might be a nice, like a neighborhood type of thing, but you got to somehow figure out a way to alleviate just some of the parking things, even if it's talking to, Beverly has, my son was a bowler. I know what that Beverly Lane parking lot looks like during leagues, summer leagues, kids leagues, tournaments. I'm not sure how you get there.
So I think that, the onus is on us, as you're telling us, so we'll figure it out. DOA's got street parking too. I've been over trying to park at DOA to eat and can't get on the street there either, right? So I'm aware of what, and like I said, we have another business in Itasca that had a similar issue, and we had a vet to a neighboring business and work it out with them. So that is not one thing I did. I focused more on the fact that we would need more than 10% to make this work for us. And if that's something that you're willing to consider, then I'll work out the parking. I'll figure it out. You'll be surprised. I'll come back with an answer for the parking.
One second, Randy.
I didn't want to interrupt you. Just once you've completed your thought.
So I'm personally, I probably won't be here when you come before the board to vote for the extra 10%, but I like your idea. I'm okay with 10%, higher than 10%. But the parking, that's what we're all about here. People need to park, but I understand your plan. But I did want to bring to your attention that possible 2-hour limit in the future, because that might
appreciate that.
Might have not have been something you've thought of. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it.
Trustee Baldino.
Thank you, Mayor. So basically, this is my neighborhood. We live just a few blocks from here. And so I hear about, Randy said we're not supposed to talk about the economic impact, but I hear about it all the time. And I'm excited, and I think this is a great project for the TIF district here, but echoing all the concerns. I'm not going to go into it. I think there is going to be more competition for parking there as the multi-use development on Hickory happens. You know, there's the soccer field there also contributes, and that's going to bite into a big chunk of your peak time. And that, when those soccer matches are going on, Hickory's full. And Douglas gets full, and so it's going to bite into that beginning part of your operating hours. The weekend hours are from 3 to a
10.
little bit later?
10.
Oh, still on
3 to
10?
10, 3 to
even on
11, well, Friday 3 to 11, 3 to 11, 3 to 7,
Okay.
or noon to 7 on Sunday.
So till 6, 7 o'clock at night, you're going to be competing with not just the bowling alley and not just the nights, but it's also the use at the Park District facilities and the Legion. So I do think that parking is going to be a evolving problem there. And so, you know, without beating that issue any more than it's already been beating, I really think, and I too am willing to talk about, you know, exceptions to the ordinance as it stands, but the parking is going to be a thing.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
I mean, I do think that my option is to neighbor with a business, and I have some thoughts in my head as we're here right now, which I won't say on the microphone, but
Right.
we do have connection with a large parking lot that's empty after school hours down the street, so there's other places to talk about and think about and ways for us to get cars there.
Trustee Blackwood.
Thank you, Mayor. Your target customer base is really what age to what age? Now, I know it's all-encompassing, but really.
Right. Anyone over 21, but typically craft beer drinkers are older because it is a more expensive journey. It's a $6 to anywhere from $6 to $8 to $9 to $10. It's not a Miller Lite. It's not a bucket of beer, you know, so it's someone that appreciates the taste of it and the fact that it's seasonal, there's ingredients, they're local, some can be expensive, and they come in for that.
And to your experience, most of the activity that you've had with your other establishments, it's heavier in the summer and maybe fall and lightens up a bit in the winter, depending on what you're promoting at the time?
I mean, people have their seasonal favorites, so you might get your winter. I personally like the winter beer, so I'm out there in the wintertime. If you have an outdoor area, definitely you're going to have more in the summer. When we did our neighborhood meeting, we had a couple that was right behind us with a baby and a dog, and they were saying this is what we want because we want to be able to stroll over with our dog and the baby. I mean, it's just a wide range of people and needs and things that they.
And might be a little bit myopic on this, but I really think that the issue with parking is going to be primarily in the summer and the fall, when people are, more out and about. But then again, as you say, it depends on, whatever you're promoting. But I think that if I were part of your team, I would be saying that if you have patrons that are anywhere from 35 to 55, and they enjoy an industrial feel that this is going to provide them, and they're going to feel like they're having a bit of the downtown or downtown Chicago in the suburbs, and yet there's an affinity towards the community, and they're used to, depending on the age again, Ubering about or, bicycling about. I really think that for me, I have no problem with going to the 35 or even pushing it to the 40 square feet. And actually, when I was looking at the outdoor gaming area, it reminded me of some of the places that I've been in California where they have the bocce ball outside, where they have the bago tournaments, all different sorts of things that bring community together. So from my perspective, parking is something that you'll figure out whether it's Uber, whether it's valet, whether it's bikes, whether it's what have you, or even lending or some shared parking across the street. But I'm all for it. Whatever you need to do, do.
Appreciate it. And to your point, I mean, we will encourage Uber. We will encourage walking and biking, but we can't guarantee that.
Sure.
So we do need to have a plan, because for all we know, everybody could drive up and we could have, a group of 4 in 4 different cars. So we are aware, more so than ever from this conversation, that we need to come up with a parking plan.
That's all I have. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Well, we do have an ordinance that says 10%. Which we just passed, and so 42% would be a large variation. We do grant variations all the time. I have no problem with doing that, but I do have a concern about granting that much of a variation. So I would appreciate, me personally, if you can back off that 42% to some number, and I think that would make me feel better just in terms of what our current ordinance is. But it would also help at least partially alleviate some of the parking issues if you can make it, down to 48 spots that you need instead of 53 or whatever it was. So I think that would help if you could make the numbers work. You can get it, under 42%. That would help me in terms of my ultimate vote on this. And so you know where I'm coming from. I think you know where the rest of the board is coming from. I think. Ultimately, the board is in favor of the concept, but has issues with the parking primarily. So, Mr. Recklaus.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm not looking to prolong the discussion, but you know me, I always like to try to squeeze as much input from the board out as possible on these things to make it easier for staff and the petitioner. When we set these things up, we really had 4 categories related to breweries. You had larger breweries where you had 10%, microbreweries where you had 10%, depending on the zoning situation. And the issue there was that a microbrewery or a brewery, and the last one, I'm sorry, was a brew pub, where you would have, a brew pub is essentially a restaurant that has, they brew their own beer. And there was no limitation on the square footage of how much you could, the retail area for a brew pub. But a brew pub was required to serve food. And, obviously, and I'm just trying to be consistent with all of our liquor licenses. We know that if we do one thing for one group, we'll hear about it from our existing downtown liquor license holders. The logic behind this was, not to say it can't be revisited, is that a brewery and microbrewery, the tap room is ancillary to the primary business. The primary business is that they brew beer. And they were allowed to have this tap room if they had a limitation on the number of ounces that they could sell, and if it was a smaller area, it was ancillary, but they were allowed to then not have to serve food, which we know is a big component of our liquor code. What I'm saying, and I'm just trying to play devil's advocate, because I think it's better to have this conversation now than later after we spend a lot of time on this. If we get over that 35%, are we essentially looking at more or less a brew pub without a food requirement that we're placing in a district that's currently zoned, or that we're planning to have zoned residential? So again, I think it's a question of location, because one of the reasons this area was zoned residential is there's a realization of a limitation on parking. If you had a lot of brew pubs pop up, none of whom had parking, obviously that would be a problem, and it wouldn't be a sustainable zoning model. And so I'm just looking at, again, because obviously there's a lot of enthusiasm for this use. That's the reason why we wanted to change our liquor code to accommodate it. But in terms of this location, there's a relationship not only with the parking, but also, I would argue, with the food, given how our liquor code is written. It can always be modified at the will of the board, but I'm just trying to save us from criticism from some of our current liquor license holders.
Yeah, it's a good point, Randy, and I think you heard from the board in terms of what their thoughts were on it. But I think if the petitioner is willing to get under that 42%, I don't know what the number would be, that would help satisfy some of the concerns that you just raised. That might be helpful.
That's,
So-
I'm just looking for further feedback from the board as a whole, just to see if they were still comfortable with that, given feedback we may receive from other business owners.
Right. Trustee Tinaglia.
This is a tough one, Randy. I mean, we just created this category with out of thin air, basically, right? And now, as was commented on, it's evolved past where we finally caught up to. We're running from behind the 8 ball. So our numbers and our theories for what we chose to create are already obsolete. That's what we're kind of hearing. And I don't know that I disagree with that. I think it'll be interesting to see if the variances come in as a request to the brew pub, like you just said, the restaurant that's not really a restaurant, because it seems to work easier to get through the variance process, or is it a tap room that's over the 10%? Every time you come in for a variance or for some sort of a zoning, you have to think about, well, which of these rules do I want to break, and which ones might be easier to hurdle over, right? So you pick and choose your battles. And I think for you walking away, as I stand behind that podium often, I want to know from me on this side now, where do I stand? And I'll tell you where I stand. I think it's awesome. I'm great with everything you presented. Your only issue for me is this parking.
Got it.
I'm not afraid of the size. I'm not afraid of the location. I wonder why you didn't choose something closer to a public parking garage, and this would all be done. And I'm not looking for an answer tonight because it's getting late. All I'm giving
It's a
you
very
is
short answer.
is what I think I would want to hear if I were you tonight, from me alone. That's my opinion.
All right. Anybody else? Trustee Sidor.
Just from the 5,000-foot view here, I'd like to see you somehow make this work, because I know what's going to happen. You're going to go to another town, and you're going to be successful in another town. And we're going to say, oh, there's a vacancy, and other breweries are going to look at Arlington Heights and say, you know, they're just not there yet. Yeah, the parking's the issue, let's not go there. But I don't personally want you to say, forget Arlington Heights. It's been a long road. We've been doing this for how many years now?
6.
6 years. And here we are today with an early review, and we're still kind of scratching our heads up here a little bit, but I think we're trying to give you a direction. But it would kill me if you, because of who you are and what, you know, the successes you've had, and I know, Mr. Doe over here, who was a great waiter over there and a brewer. If you went to another town, I think it would be really bad for us, and I don't want that to happen. So let's work hard to get as close to satisfying, the mayor with his issue with square footage and the parking issue, where you can still be successful and your business model is going to work and you can turn the room over 2 or 3 times. And if anything I can do to help you moving forward, let me know.
Can we park in your driveway? No, what I'm saying, this has been a long journey, and we bought our building there thinking that this was permitted to brew. And at the time, that's all we wanted to do. That was 6 years ago when Solemn Oath was the first to come up with this concept of adding a tap room. And it's not big breweries with little tap rooms. It's breweries and big tap rooms. And tap rooms, they're expanding. Microphone expanded. Noon Whistle's expand. Everybody's expanding their tap room because it's what people want. So we can banter back and forth on what the concept is, but this is what I've learned just being in the business. So in some ways, it's a blessing in disguise. This has evolved. And now we're at the point where we think that we can put in what is really at market and what we think we can handle and what would be good for the community. The parking is the issue. We get that, and we will come back with a proposal for that. And then also the 42%, we'll take it under advisement. The thing that concerns me, to be frank, is the only place I saw it limited was Elk Grove, and then they went back and had to redo it through the Plan Commission again to get another 4,000 square feet. And that was 2 years later, and now they're at 40%. So I just don't want to see us go back only to say in a year from now, hey, your village wants more. I mean, I did that with my dog daycare, then they wanted boarding, and then I had to go back. You know, you're filling in the needs of the community, of the people that are sitting out here that want this. I think we're going to prove to you that we're trustworthy and we're a good business and we're a solid community partner. So I just don't want to have to keep coming back asking for more. That's
I
my
understand
concern.
that, and it all depends on what arrangements you can make for parking.
Got
So, I mean, I'd be willing to be more flexible if you came back to me with a plan for parking.
Got it.
So, normally I might take public comment for something like this, but I'm not going to do that tonight. I know where everybody stands on this. We don't need, it's 10:45, we don't need 50 people coming up saying they support this business, because I understand where you're coming from for that. So everybody understands what we're concerned about, and I would just leave it at that. So hopefully the staff's got enough direction, probably not as much as you'd like, but that's where we're at. So
We will continue to work with the Ms. Egan and her team on trying to look for opportunities for parking and try to see if we can get that number closer down to the ordinance, so it's closer to an ancillary type use.
okay, last comment, Trustee Tinaglia.
What is your time frame? When will we see you again? As Trustee Sidor pointed out, I think you've been patient long enough, and I think staff is excited as we are up here, so I want to have some sort of a idea of when you think you're going to take your next big steps here.
So I think we have to answer some questions from the building department. I think there was also some design application I needed to do. So I'll work as quick as I can.
Very good. Hope to see you soon.
And again, because this is early review, this still has to go through the building permit process, design review, the whole 9 yards. So,
Understand.
yeah.
Right. Well, thank you, and thank you all for joining us tonight. Anything else, Mr. Reckless, under report of the village manager?
Nothing further.
Anything from the board under petitions and communications? Seeing none, a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
By Trustee Scaletta, seconded by Trustee
By
Baldino.
everybody.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you all.
So Rich, are you looking for? Rich looking